On a snow-filled night, I heard Rufus, my old faithful dog, barking furiously when he discovered a strange creature hiding in the barn. But before I could understand what was happening, I saw the little alien girl trembling uncontrollably. And then she suddenly embraced Rufus, as if he were the only family she had left. The bitter winter wind howled through the trees, shaking the wooden slats of the old barn. Jace wrapped his flannel coat tighter around his weathered frame, squinting through the darkness toward the chicken coop. The snow had started falling an hour ago, blanketing his isolated farm in pristine white that glowed faintly under the cloudy night sky. "Come on, Rufus," he called to the aging Arctic dog at his side, the large gray and white canine, faithful companion for nearly a decade, padded alongside him with alert eyes that belied his years. Jace's breath formed clouds in the frigid air as he made mental notes about tomorrow's chores. The heating system in the barn needed repair before the temperature dropped any lower. He couldn't risk losing any livestock to this harsh winter, not when they were his only reliable source of income since Sarah's passing 3 years ago. The silence of the countryside pressed in around them, broken only by the whisper of snowflakes and the occasional creak of pine branches yielding to the weight of gathering snow. Jace's thoughts drifted, as they often did on cold nights, to memories of his wife, her laugh, her warmth, the way she'd hum while tending the garden that now lay dormant under winter's embrace. Rufus suddenly stopped, his ears perking up. The dog's posture stiffened, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Jace asked, instantly alert. Rufus's growl intensified, his attention fixed on the shadowy corner of the barn where the chicken coop connected to the storage area. The single bulb hanging from the barn ceiling flickered, casting uncertain light across the weathered structure. Jace reached for his flashlight with one hand and gripped a sturdy wooden stick with the other. Years of living alone had taught him caution. Wild animals sometimes sought shelter during snowstorms: foxes, raccoons, even the occasional bear wandering down from the mountains. "Stay," he commanded Rufus in a low voice, though the dog strained against the instruction, hackles raised. Cautiously, Jace approached the barn door, each footstep crunching through the thin layer of snow. Curiosity mingled with wariness as he reached for the latch, wondering what creature had disturbed his faithful companion's peace. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and animal feed hung heavy in the air. Jace swung his flashlight in a slow arc, illuminating the interior: stacked hay bales, tools hanging on the wall, the chicken roost where his hens had already settled for the night. Everything seemed in order, yet Rufus continued growling, now practically vibrating with tension. Jace moved deeper into the barn, listening. Then he heard it, a faint rustling from behind a stack of hay bales, accompanied by quick, panicked breathing. "Hello," he called out, taking another step forward. "Is someone there?" The rustling stopped abruptly. Silence stretched between them, broken only by Rufus's continuous low growl. Jace swung his flashlight toward the sound. The beam caught movement, then illuminated a face, dirty, with unnaturally pale greenish skin and wide, frightened eyes that reflected the light with an amber glow. Not human eyes. His breath caught in his throat. The creature, a small, childlike figure, pressed itself further into the corner, trembling violently, clearly terrified of both him and Rufus. Jace stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The figure looked like a child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old in human terms, but with distinctly alien features: the greenish skin, those strange glowing eyes, and a delicate pattern of faint markings along the temples. "Easy, Rufus," Jace whispered, placing a restraining hand on the dog's collar as the animal strained forward. "Easy now." The alien child flinched at the sound of his voice, trying to make herself even smaller against the barn wall. As she moved, Jace noticed something around her neck, a small stone pendant that emitted a faint, blue-purple glow, pulsing slightly with each of her rapid breaths. For a moment, Jace thought it might be some broken toy, a piece of technology perhaps, but the shifting colors seemed too organic, too responsive to be manufactured. Something about it whispered of power beyond his understanding. "I won't hurt you," Jace said softly, slowly lowering his wooden stick to show he meant no harm. The child's eyes darted between him and Rufus, terror evident in every line of her small body. Suddenly, she made a break for it, lunging toward the barn door. Rufus, startled by the sudden movement, broke free from Jace's grip, the chain leash snapping as he bounded after the fleeing figure. "Rufus, no!" Jace shouted, diving to catch the dog's scruff. He managed to grab hold just as the child tripped, sliding across the hay-strewn floor before curling into a protective ball, hands covering her face as she began to sob. Jace held firmly onto Rufus's collar, whispering calming words to the agitated dog. "It's okay. I won't let him hurt you," he called to the child. "You're safe here." The alien girl peeked through her fingers, her gaze alternating between fear and wariness. The strange pendant around her neck suddenly flashed brighter for just a moment, a pulse of power that made the air seem to vibrate briefly before settling back to normal. Jace watched the phenomenon with both fascination and apprehension, sensing that he had just glimpsed something extraordinary, something that might explain why this otherworldly child had sought refuge in his humble barn on this snowy winter night. Jace maintained his calm demeanor, though his heart raced. He knew instinctively that his next actions would determine whether this frightened creature would trust him or flee back into the deadly winter night. "Sit, Rufus," he commanded firmly, and the dog reluctantly obeyed, though his eyes remained fixed on the stranger. Jace slowly reached into his pocket and produced a small protein bar he'd been saving for his morning chores. He unwrapped it, broke off a piece, and gently placed it on the ground between them. "Food," he said simply, pushing it slightly toward the child with his fingertips before backing away. The alien girl watched him with those strange amber eyes, her trembling subsiding slightly. After a long moment, she reached out with a small, dirty hand and quickly snatched the protein bar. She sniffed it cautiously, then took a tentative bite. When she realized it was edible, she devoured it in seconds, watching Jace expectantly. "More," she whispered in a voice like rustling leaves. Jace started at the sound, not because she had spoken, but because he understood her. The word was oddly accented, formed by a mouth not designed for human speech, yet comprehensible. "You speak English?" he asked, astonished. The child didn't respond to his question, but her eyes remained fixed on the remainder of the protein bar in his hand. Her hunger was evident. Jace nodded, breaking off another piece and offering it to her. This time, she took it less frantically, though her movements remained cautious. As she ate, Jace studied her more carefully. Her clothes, if they could be called that, were thin, tattered fabric wholly inadequate for the winter night. Various crude bandages covered parts of her arms and legs, suggesting recent injuries. Rufus, to Jace's surprise, had settled down, his initial aggression fading. The dog watched the child with growing curiosity, rather than hostility. "Wait here," Jace said, making a staying gesture with his palm. "I'll get you something warmer." He backed away slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "Rufus, stay. Watch," he commanded, and the dog settled into a sitting position, still eyeing the strange visitor. Jace hurried to the farmhouse, gathering supplies, a thick wool blanket, a child-sized jacket left from when his sister's kids had visited years ago, a thermos of warm milk, and more food. When he returned to the barn, he half expected the child to be gone, but she remained huddled in the same spot, now tentatively extending a hand toward Rufus, who watched her with cautious curiosity. Carefully, Jace laid out the blankets on a clean patch of hay, creating a makeshift bed in a draft-free corner. He placed the warm jacket nearby and poured some milk into a cup. "This will keep you warm," he said, gesturing to the items. "You can sleep here tonight, where it's safe." The child watched him arrange everything, her head tilted slightly, in what might have been confusion or consideration. When Jace backed away, she cautiously approached the blanket nest, running her fingers over the wool with evident wonder. She pulled the jacket toward herself, examining it before slipping it on with some difficulty. It was too large for her small frame, but it would provide warmth. When she finally settled onto the blanket, she looked up at Jace with an expression he couldn't quite read. "No. Hurt. No more," she said haltingly, pointing to a scar on her arm, then shaking her head emphatically. Jace's heart constricted at the implication. Someone, or something, had hurt this child. His gaze dropped to the small cut visible near her eye, the poorly bandaged wounds on her chest and thigh. She wasn't just a lost traveler. She was a fugitive, running from something that had caused her harm. "No hurt," he affirmed, shaking his head. "You're safe here." The child pulled the blanket tighter around herself, inhaling the warmth. As she did, the strange pendant, what Jace would later learn was called a heart shard, flickered brightly, emanating a soft glow that seemed to warm the air around them despite the snow-laden wind outside. Fascinated, Jace reached toward the glowing stone, but the child instinctively clutched it closer, the glow dimming. As she did, a cold breeze suddenly whipped through the barn, rattling the windows with unnatural force, as if responding to her emotions. Jace withdrew his hand immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't touch it." Outside in the distant forest, a strange light swept across the night sky, a searching beam that briefly illuminated the falling snow before changing direction. Something about its movement seemed deliberate, scanning, hunting. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter night. "I think we should keep quiet," he whispered, motioning toward the window where the light had passed. "I think someone might be looking for you." The fear that flashed across the child's face confirmed his suspicion. She nodded, pulling the blanket over her head as if to hide from the searching light. Jace settled onto a hay bale nearby, watching over his unexpected guest. Rufus padded over and lay down beside the child's makeshift bed, as if appointed her guardian. As the night deepened and the snow continued to fall, Jace found himself wondering, who was this strange child? Where had she come from? And more importantly, who or what was hunting her? The morning light filtered weakly through the barn windows, casting soft beams across the hay-strewn floor. Jace had spent most of the night alternating between fitful dozing and alert watchfulness, his mind too busy with questions to find proper rest. The alien child, he had taken to thinking of her simply as the girl, slept curled tightly beneath the blankets, her small form barely visible, save for the occasional shudder that passed through her body, as if even in sleep she remained afraid. Rufus had remained faithfully at her side, occasionally lifting his head to peer toward the door whenever a sound disturbed the pre-dawn quiet. Jace rose quietly, stretching his stiff muscles. He needed to understand more about his visitor, to find some way to communicate beyond the few words she had spoken. Returning to the farmhouse, he gathered some supplies, an old sketchpad and pencil, a photo album, and a freshly toasted piece of bread with butter. When he re-entered the barn, the girl was awake, sitting upright with wide, alert eyes that tracked his every movement. Rufus remained beside her, seemingly accepted now as a non-threat. "Good morning," Jace said softly, settling down a safe distance away. He offered the toast, which she took with less hesitation than the night before, though her movements remained quick and wary. While she ate, Jace opened the sketchpad and drew a simple stick figure, He pointed to it, then to himself. Jace, he said clearly. My name is Jace. The girl watched him curiously, tilting her head. Jace then drew another, smaller figure and pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. Name? He asked simply. She hesitated, then spoke in that soft, rustling voice. T. T, Jace repeated, writing the name beneath the drawing. It was a simple name, childlike in its brevity, yet somehow fitting for this small, vulnerable being. He flipped through the photo album until he found a picture of a dog, then held it up alongside Rufus. Dog, he said, pointing between the image and the real animal. T's lips curved into what might have been a smile as she nodded. Dog, she repeated, reaching out tentatively to touch Rufus's fur. The old canine remained still, allowing the contact with unexpected patience. Their rudimentary language lesson was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel outside. Jace tensed, peering through a crack in the barn wall. Miller's old truck was pulling up the driveway, his neighbor, who lived a mile down the road. An elderly but sharp-eyed man who rarely visited without purpose. Stay here, Jace whispered urgently to T. Stay quiet. Hide. T needed no translation for the alarm in his voice. She immediately retreated to her corner, pulling the blanket over herself while Rufus positioned himself protectively in front of her. Jace exited the barn, closing the door firmly behind him, and strode toward the approaching vehicle with forced casualness. Miller rolled down his window, his weathered face creased with curiosity. Morning, Jace. Just checking in. Saw your lights on all night in the barn. Everything okay with your stock? Jace nodded, trying to appear relaxed. Just a minor issue with Rufus. He got into some thorny bushes chasing a rabbit. Scratched himself up pretty good. Had to clean and dress the wounds. Miller's eyes narrowed slightly, noting the antiseptic smell that clung to Jace's clothes. Need any help with the old boy? I've got some better ointment than that drugstore stuff you probably used. No, Jace replied too quickly. He's resting now. Should be fine. Thanks for checking, though. They exchanged a few more pleasantries about the weather and upcoming town meeting before Miller finally shifted his truck into gear. Well, holler if you need anything, he said, though his expression suggested he sensed something wasn't quite right. As the truck disappeared down the snowy driveway, Jace released the breath he'd been holding. That had been close. Too close. If Miller had insisted on seeing Rufus or entering the barn. Inside, T remained hidden beneath the blanket, only her eyes visible, watching him warily as he returned. Friend? She asked in her soft voice. Yes, Jace nodded. Friend. But... He struggled to explain the complexity of the situation. Not safe to tell anyone about you. T seemed to understand perfectly, nodding solemnly. Not safe, she agreed. As night fell again, Jace became increasingly aware of unusual activity in the surrounding area. 3 small aircraft, too quiet and maneuverable to be standard helicopters, had been circling intermittently throughout the day, their sleek black shapes occasionally visible through breaks in the clouds. They emitted strange, pulsing green beams that swept across the forested areas surrounding his property. From his kitchen window, Jace watched one pass directly overhead, its searchbeam briefly illuminating his yard before moving on. He drew the curtains quickly, returning to the barn where T had remained hidden all day. I think we need to be more careful, he told her, though he wasn't sure how much she understood. Something's out there, looking. T's reaction told him she comprehended perfectly. Her small body tensed, and she clutched the glowing pendant, the heart shard, tightly in her fist. Slavers, she whispered, the word carrying such terror that Jace felt his skin prickle with gooseflesh. Slavers, he repeated. They're looking for you. T nodded, her amber eyes wide with fear. She pointed to the heart shard, then shook her head violently. No touch, she said emphatically. That night, as Jace tried to sleep on a makeshift bed of hay beside T and Rufus, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through snow outside the barn. Metallic footsteps. Not human ones. T heard them too, her body going rigid with terror as she clutched Rufus tighter. "Dog, safe?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll keep you both safe," Jace promised, though he had no idea how he would defend them against whatever technological terrors lurked outside. For nearly an hour, they remained frozen in silence, listening as the mechanical steps circled the property, pausing occasionally as if searching for signals. Finally, the sounds receded, but Jace knew with grim certainty they would be back. When the pale light of dawn finally arrived, Jace and T sat huddled in the barn, sharing a warm potato he'd cooked over a small portable stove. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, there was a fragile bond forming between them, a human and an alien child, finding brief sanctuary together in a world that had been cruel to them both. T's trust in him was growing. She had begun to use more words, though her vocabulary remained limited. She would point to objects, and Jace would name them, which she would then repeat carefully. When she wasn't learning, she stayed close to Rufus, finding evident comfort in the dog's steady presence. Their peaceful morning was shattered by the sound of vehicles approaching, not Miller's familiar truck, but the heavy rumble of multiple engines. Jace peered through a gap in the barn boards and felt his blood run cold. 3 armored vehicles had pulled into his driveway, their black metal exteriors unlike any terrestrial design he'd ever seen. "They're here," he whispered to T, who was already shrinking back in terror, the heart shard glowing brighter with her fear. "Stay hidden." Jace grabbed his wooden staff, a pitiful weapon against whatever advanced technology these beings possessed. But it was all he had. He stepped outside to confront the intruders, hoping to somehow convince them that T wasn't here, to buy her time to escape. 3 figures emerged from the vehicles, tall and imposing in metallic suits, their faces obscured by helmets with reflective visors. They carried what appeared to be weapons, along with devices that emitted soft beeping sounds as they swept them in various directions. "We know the child is here," one spoke, its voice artificially modulated. "Surrender it immediately. Resistance is futile and inadvisable." Jace planted his feet firmly in the snow, raising his wooden staff. "You're mistaken," he shouted, trying to sound convincing. "There's no one here but me. Leave my property now." The 3 figures exchanged glances. Then the leader raised a device that was clearly detecting something from the barn. "Our scanners have located the energy signature of the heart shard. Do not attempt deception." Before Jace could respond, the barn door flew open behind him. T stood there, her small figure silhouetted against the shadows within. Rufus at her side, hackles raised and teeth bared. "No!" Jace shouted, but it was too late. One of the slavers raised an electric whip that crackled with energy. Rufus, protective as ever, lunged forward with a ferocious bark, intercepting the weapon's arc. The whip connected with the dog's back, sending him tumbling with a pained yelp, though he stubbornly struggled back to his feet, refusing to yield his protective position. T's face contorted with rage and fear at seeing Rufus hurt. She raised her hands, the heart shard blazing with sudden, intense light. "Heart shard," she cried in a language Jace didn't recognize, her voice carrying a power that seemed to reverberate through the air itself. The pendant around her neck erupted with blue-violet energy, sending waves of force rippling outward. The snow around them rose in spiraling columns, and every metal object in the vicinity, tools, parts of the armored vehicles, even components of the slavers' suits, began to shudder and vibrate, pulled toward the slavers as if by a reversed magnetic field. The 3 intruders staggered backward, their weapons torn from their hands by the strange force. They struggled to maintain their footing, but the power emanating from the heart shard intensified, throwing them bodily into a stack of hay bales. Jace knelt beside the injured Rufus, cradling the loyal dog as tears welled in his eyes. He watched in awe as T, previously so frightened and vulnerable, now stood with a strange power flowing through her, defending those who had protected her. One of the fallen slavers managed to right himself, drawing a small laser weapon from a compartment in his suit. He aimed directly at T, finger moving to the trigger. Jace saw the motion and reacted instinctively. He launched himself forward, putting his body between T and the weapon. The laser discharged with a high-pitched whine, and Jace felt searing pain explode in his chest as the beam struck him, sending him crashing to the ground. T's scream of anguish echoed across the snowy yard. "No more! Harm!" she wailed, her small hands extended toward the slavers. The heart shard responded to her emotions, its glow intensifying to blinding brilliance. A shockwave of energy burst forth, intercepting another laser blast midair and reflecting it back toward the slavers. The feedback caused their weapons to overload, exploding in bursts of light that left them temporarily blinded and disoriented. The lead slaver, recovering quickly, aimed his remaining weapon directly at the heart shard itself. The beam struck the glowing stone, and for a heart-stopping moment, the light flickered, then dimmed. T collapsed to her knees, face contorted in pain, eyes squeezed shut. Jace, struggling against the searing pain in his chest, reached for T's hand. "Are you okay? Please be okay," he gasped, each word an effort. The remaining slavers, battered and with most of their equipment destroyed, exchanged quick communications through their helmet systems. After a moment of consultation, the leader gave a signal, and they began a tactical retreat, abandoning the field of battle but leaving an unspoken promise of return in their wake. The barn area lay in ruins, snow stained with droplets of blood, metallic debris scattered everywhere. T cradled Rufus, tears streaming down her face as the loyal dog whimpered softly, his tail weakly wagging despite his injuries. Her heart pounded with fear, not for herself now, but for Jace, who lay wounded because he had chosen to protect her. Morning light spilled through the damaged barn window, casting golden rays across Jace's face as he slowly regained consciousness. His first sensation was pain, a deep, burning ache in his chest where the laser had struck. His second was awareness of a small weight against his side, T, sitting vigilantly beside him, one arm wrapped around a bandaged Rufus. Jace blinked, taking in his surroundings. They had moved him into the barn overnight, onto a makeshift bed of straw. His wound had been clumsily but effectively bandaged, likely by T's small hands. "You're awake," he murmured, his voice raspy. T's amber eyes brightened at the sound of his voice. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her expression conveying what her limited vocabulary couldn't. "I'm sorry. You hurt," she whispered. Jace managed a weak smile. "It's okay, as long as you're safe." Rufus, hearing his master's voice, struggled to his feet despite his injuries. The dog limped over, nuzzling Jace's hand before settling back down beside T. The bond between the alien child and the old dog had clearly deepened. Rufus now treated her as something to be protected at all costs, and T returned his devotion with gentle affection. T leaned forward, resting her forehead briefly against Rufus's. Her eyes closed in a moment of connection that transcended species. When she pulled back, she placed a small kiss on the dog's cheek, an unmistakably tender gesture that spoke of the comfort she found in his presence, perhaps the first true comfort she had known since her flight began. As Jace's strength gradually returned throughout the day, his curiosity grew. The mysterious pendant, the heart shard, sat on a small wooden table nearby, its glow subdued but steady. "T," he asked gently, "who are you? Where did you get this stone?" T hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing scarring that looked disturbingly like the marks left by restraints or shackles. She pointed to the heart shard, then drew a small crown shape in the dust on the floor. "I was royalty, princess," she said haltingly. Jace's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Princess? Of what empire?" T shook her head, unwilling or unable to elaborate further. Her expression closed, suggesting the memories were too painful to revisit. Jace didn't press. Instead, he forced himself to consider their situation pragmatically. "The farm isn't safe anymore," he said, thinking aloud. "They'll come back for you." T nodded, understanding perfectly. Her gaze traveled to the window, where the snow had begun falling again, as if nature itself was trying to cover the evidence of yesterday's battle. Jace slowly sat up, wincing at the pain in his chest. "We need to gather supplies, food, warm clothes, medical supplies. We have to find somewhere safer." With T's help, he began assembling what they would need: dried food that wouldn't spoil, extra blankets, the warmest clothing he could find, a basic first aid kit with antibiotics. He also took photos of T's scars with his old digital camera, documenting the evidence of her mistreatment, should they ever need proof. Throughout their preparations, T watched him with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. When everything was finally packed, she looked up at him and nodded resolutely. "Yes, go now." They loaded their supplies into Jace's old silver pickup truck. Rufus settled in the middle of the bench seat with T beside him. As Jace started the engine, he cast one last look at the farm that had been his home for decades, the only place that still held memories of Sarah. He felt a pang of loss, but as he glanced at T's determined little face, he knew he was making the right choice. The truck pulled away from the property, tires crunching through fresh snow as dark clouds gathered overhead, promising a blizzard. Inside the cab, an unlikely family, a human farmer, an alien princess, and a loyal old dog, set out into the unknown, leaving behind the only safety they had known, driven forward by forces larger than themselves. They drove in silence for hours, the truck laboring up mountain roads as the snow fell heavier. T sat with her face pressed against the window, watching the forest blur past, the heart shard clutched tightly in her small hand. Occasionally, she would glance up at the sky, her expression a mixture of sorrow and longing, as if searching for something or someone among the clouds. Jace focused on the treacherous road, his mind racing through possibilities. Where could they go? Who could they trust? The implications of harboring an alien fugitive, especially one apparently of royal lineage, weighed heavily on him. Yet, every time he glanced at T's face, he felt his resolve strengthen. Whatever her story was, she deserved protection, not persecution. Rufus lay between them, his head occasionally lifting when the truck hit a rough patch, his intelligent eyes moving between his two companions as if sensing their unspoken concerns. As they rounded a particularly sharp bend on the mountain pass, the truck suddenly fishtailed on a patch of black ice. Jace fought the steering wheel, but the vehicle spun, sliding toward the edge of the road. With a sickening lurch, they came to a stop mere feet from a steep embankment. "Everyone out," Jace ordered, heart pounding. Carefully, they abandoned the precariously balanced truck, stepping gingerly onto the snow-covered road. T clutched Rufus's fur, her eyes wide with fear at their near miss. It was then that Jace noticed a figure emerging from the pine trees ahead, tall and cloaked in black, face obscured by a hood. The stranger stopped several yards away, raising a hand in a clear signal to halt. "Stop there," came a warm, deep voice that somehow carried easily through the falling snow. "T, I've been waiting for you for so long." Jace instinctively reached for the folding knife in his pocket, positioning himself protectively in front of T. "Who are you?" he demanded, adrenaline masking the pain from his chest wound. T peered around him, her voice trembling as she echoed, "Who?" The figure approached slowly, then removed the hood to reveal an aged face with kind eyes and distinctly non-human features, similar to T's. The same greenish skin tone, though weathered by years, and facial markings that suggested kinship with the child. "Princess," the stranger said, bowing deeply, "I am Ryle, the last surviving royal guardian of your court. The heart shard guided me to you." T made a small, choked sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "All family killed," she whispered. Ryle nodded, tears glistening in his ancient eyes. "The king, your father, and the royal house were betrayed. But you, child, are our last hope." Jace looked between them, struggling to process this development. "You protect her?" he asked Ryle cautiously. "The heart shard called to me," Ryle replied, his gaze never leaving T. "Its power recognizes blood loyalty. Now the princess is not alone anymore." Under a snow-covered stone overhang that provided temporary shelter from the blizzard, the three figures, T, Jace, and Ryle, stood facing each other while Rufus kept watchful guard. The wind howled through the pine forest, creating a natural barrier of sound against potential eavesdroppers. Ryle unfolded a star chart, unlike any Jace had ever seen, with constellations and planetary systems far beyond Earth's astronomers' knowledge. "There is a small alliance of resistance fighters operating in secret," Ryle explained, his weathered finger tracing a path across the unfamiliar stars. "They await word of your survival. Princess." T looked up at Jace, her small hand finding his larger one. "Will you come with me?" she asked, uncertainty in her amber eyes. Jace gazed down at her, then at Rufus, who watched them with unwavering loyalty. In the span of just days, this strange child had brought purpose back to his life, a life that had been merely existing since Sarah's death. She had shown him courage, resilience, and a capacity for love that transcended species and worlds. "You've given me hope again," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll go wherever you need me," Rufus barked once, as if in agreement. They returned to the truck, which Jace had managed to pull back from the precipice. As the engine roared to life, and they continued their journey through the blinding snow, none of them noticed the three dark figures standing on the mountain ridge above, watching their departure with cold, calculating eyes. One raised a communication device to its helmet, sending a signal that pulsed across space, calling for reinforcements in the hunt that was far from over. T glanced back once, her expression hardening with determination. "They will not stop hunting me," she said, her English improving with each passing hour. Jace gripped the steering wheel tighter, and Rufus gave a low, protective growl. "They won't succeed," Jace promised. As they drove deeper into the mountains, the snowfall intensified, blanketing the world in white. Yet within the truck, the small flame of hope burned stronger than ever. Three unlikely companions united by circumstance, bound by loyalty, embarking on a journey that would take them beyond Earth's boundaries, to confront an empire that spanned the stars. The mountain road disappeared beneath the swirling snow, becoming nothing more than a suggestion of passage through the wilderness. Jace drove with intense concentration, the headlights of the old truck barely penetrating the white veil that surrounded them. Beside him, T sat with the heart shard cupped in her palms, its soft glow providing more comfort than illumination. "We need to find shelter soon," Ryle observed from the back seat, where he sat with one hand resting protectively on Rufus's head. "The storm is worsening, and we're being tracked." Jace glanced in the rearview mirror. "How can you be sure we're followed?" "The slavers have orbital technology that can detect the heart shard's energy signature through most natural barriers," Ryle explained. "Snow, rock, forest, they offer limited concealment. What we need is something that can disrupt their scanning capabilities." "Like what?" Jace asked, squinting through the windshield as the wipers fought a losing battle against the accumulating snow. "There are certain mineral formations that naturally interfere with their detection systems," Ryle said. Caves rich in magnetite, for instance. I've been mapping potential safe locations throughout this region since I arrived on your planet. T looked up suddenly, the heart shard pulsing brighter in her hands. There, she said, pointing toward what appeared to be a solid rock face half hidden by pine trees. Jace peered through the snow. I don't see anything. The princess can sense compatible energies, Ryle explained. The heart shard resonates with them. Trust her instincts. With no better options, Jace steered the truck off the barely visible road, navigating carefully between the trees until they reached the rock face T had indicated. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing but solid stone, but as they approached on foot, T in the lead with the glowing heart shard, a narrow fissure became visible, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. This will do, Ryle nodded approvingly. The mineral composition will mask our presence temporarily. They unloaded essential supplies from the truck, Jace carrying the heaviest packs despite his injury. T led Rufus by a makeshift leash, fashioned from rope, the dog following her with absolute trust. One by one, they squeezed through the narrow opening into the darkness beyond. Inside, the cave opened into a modest chamber, dry and protected from the wind. Ryle produced a small device that emitted a soft, steady light, illuminating their shelter. Ancient stalactites hung from the ceiling, while the ground was surprisingly level, as if the cave had been used as shelter before. We should be safe here for at least a day, Ryle said, examining the walls with approval. Time enough to rest and plan our next move. As Jace arranged their supplies and laid out bedrolls, T sat cross-legged in the center of the cave, the heart shard resting before her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady, as if in meditation. The stone's glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. What is she doing? Jace whispered to Ryle. Communing with the heart shard, the Guardian replied. It's more than just a gem or a power source. It's a living connection to her people's history and knowledge. Through it, she can access memories and wisdom passed down through generations of her royal line. Jace watched in fascination as T's face shifted through subtle expressions. Concentration, surprise, sorrow, determination. Can it help us? Show us what to do next. Perhaps, Ryle said. But its primary purpose is to confirm her identity and rightful claim to leadership. Without it, the resistance would have no rallying point, no legitimate heir to support. And that's why these slavers want her so badly? Ryle's expression darkened. The slavers are merely mercenaries hired by the imperial regent, the usurper who orchestrated the royal family's downfall. If they capture T and take the heart shard, the regent solidifies his claim to the throne. The resistance would be broken, with no rightful heir to fight for. Jace's gaze returned to T, this small child bearing such an impossible burden. She's just a kid, he murmured. How can anyone expect her to lead a revolution? She won't be alone, Ryle said simply, his hand resting on Jace's shoulder. She has us. Later, as T slept curled against Rufus's warm side, Jace and Ryle sat near the cave entrance, speaking in low tones. I need to understand what we're up against, Jace said. These slavers, this empire. I want to help, but I'm flying blind here. Ryle nodded, his ancient eyes reflecting the dim light. The Ilarian Empire spans 12 star systems, a federation once ruled with wisdom and compassion by T's family for generations. 6 lunar cycles ago, the Imperial Regent, Chief Advisor Merrick, orchestrated a coup, assassinating the royal family during what should have been a peaceful diplomatic summit. And T escaped somehow? Her nursemaid, loyal to the crown, hid her in an escape pod as the palace burned. The pod was programmed to seek the nearest habitable world outside imperial control. Ryle's voice hitched slightly. That loyal woman gave her life to ensure the princess survived. How did you find her? Jace asked. All royal guardians are bonded to the heart shard through a sacred ritual. When it activated, when T first used its power in your barn, I felt the resonance across space. I was already searching nearby systems, having tracked the general trajectory of her escape pod. Jace processed this information slowly. And now, what's our next step? We need to reach the Resistance's nearest outpost, Ryle explained. They maintain a hidden network throughout several neutral systems, including this one. From there, we can access transport off-world. Off-world, Jace repeated, the reality of what he was contemplating finally sinking in. Leaving Earth, traveling to distant stars, fighting in an interstellar conflict. It seemed impossible. Yet, here he was, discussing it as if planning a road trip. Your planet is not safe for her, Ryle said gently. The slavers will bring more forces, advanced technology that your world has no defense against. They will not stop until they have her. Jace glanced toward T's sleeping form. I gave her my word, he said simply. I'll go wherever she needs me to go. Ryle studied him thoughtfully. You've known her for mere days, yet you're willing to leave your world behind. Why? Jace considered the question, his hand absently rubbing his chest where the laser wound still ached. Before T came, he said slowly, I was just existing, going through motions. After my wife died, there was nothing but routine and memories. He looked at Rufus, then at T. Now there's purpose again, something that matters more than just getting through another day. Ryle nodded, understanding in his ancient eyes. The heart shard chooses its allies well, he said. It guided her to you for a reason. They fell silent, listening to the wind howling outside their sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for now, in this moment of respite, they allowed themselves the luxury of rest and reflection. T stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in her native language. The heart shard pulsed once, as if in response, its light briefly illuminating the cave walls with patterns that resembled star maps, blueprints of a journey yet to come. Dawn brought a temporary lull in the snowstorm, pale light filtering through the cave entrance to where T sat cross-legged, intently focused on Jace's weathered notebook. Ryle had been teaching her written English, amazed at how quickly she absorbed new information. The heart shard lay beside her, its glow subdued but steady, like a living nightlight. Sun, she read carefully, pointing to a simple drawing Jace had made. Tree, mountain, dog. At the last word, she reached out to stroke Rufus, who lay contentedly at her side. Jace watched from where he was repacking their supplies, marveling at the transformation in just a few days. T's vocabulary was expanding exponentially, her confidence growing alongside it. The frightened child he'd found hiding in his barn was evolving before his eyes into something remarkable. Still young, still vulnerable, but with an inner strength that occasionally shone through like sunlight, breaking through clouds. Ryle says we leave when darkness comes, T said, looking up from her impromptu lesson. Safer in night. Jace nodded. The slavers will be watching roads, populated areas. We'll take forest paths, stay away from towns. To reach the beacon, T questioned, using a word Ryle had taught her. Yes, Ryle believes there's a resistance communication beacon hidden about 40 miles from here. If we can reach it, send a signal. They'll bring a ship. T's expression grew solemn. Then, space, stars. She hesitated, amber eyes studying Jace's face. You still come? Not afraid? Jace managed a smile, though his stomach twisted at the thought of leaving Earth behind. A little afraid, he admitted. But yes, I'm still coming. T nodded, satisfied with his honesty. I was afraid too. When I came here, still afraid sometimes, but... She placed a small hand on Rufus's head, then reached toward Jace. Not alone now. The simple statement warmed Jace more than he could express. He cleared his throat, blinking away unexpected moisture in his eyes. No, you're not alone. Not anymore. Their moment was interrupted by Ryle's return from his scouting expedition outside. The ancient guardian entered the cave with silent footsteps, shaking snow from his cloak. The storm has lessened, but our window of opportunity remains small, he reported. Imperial scouts have established a search perimeter approximately 10 miles from this location. They're using thermal imaging to compensate for the heart shard's energy signature being masked by the cave minerals. How many? Jace asked, tension returning to his shoulders. At least 24 ground troops, with aerial support, Ryle said grimly. They're taking no chances this time. T's hand tightened around the heart shard. They want this, she said quietly. Want me to stop the resistance. Ryle knelt before her, his weathered face solemn. Princess, what we do now will determine the fate of 12 star systems. Billions of lives. The burden is heavy, but you do not carry it alone. T squared her small shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of royalty that Jace could suddenly visualize her as the leader she might one day become. We go at nightfall, she said with quiet authority. The hours until dusk passed with meticulous preparation. Jace checked and rechecked their supplies, ensuring they had adequate food, water, and medical provisions for the journey ahead. Ryle sketched detailed maps of their route, marking areas to avoid and potential secondary shelters if needed. T continued her language studies, determined to master as much communication as possible. Rufus seemed to sense the importance of the coming journey, staying close to T's side and maintaining an alert vigilance that belied his age and recent injuries. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the cave entrance, they made final preparations to depart. Jace helped T into the warmest clothing they had, layers of thermal wear beneath a child-sized snowsuit they'd brought from the farm. Ryle donned his dark cloak, designed to blend with shadows and deflect casual observation. The truck is too conspicuous now, Ryle explained. We'll proceed on foot, following game trails where possible to minimize our tracks. Jace nodded, slinging a backpack over his shoulders and wincing slightly as the weight pressed against his healing wound. How far to the beacon? Approximately 12 hours of travel, accounting for the terrain and weather conditions, Ryle replied. We must reach it before the next sunset. T stood between them, the heart shard now secured in a small pouch hanging from a cord around her neck, hidden beneath her clothing. She reached for Jace's hand on one side and Ryle's on the other, forming a chain of commitment. Together, she said simply. They emerged from the cave into a world transformed by snow and darkness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white that stretched in every direction, punctuated only by the dark silhouettes of pine trees. Above them, stars emerged from breaks in the clouds, distant points of light that no longer seemed quite so unreachable. Ryle took the lead, his keen eyes picking out the safest path through the wilderness. T followed, with Rufus padding silently beside her. Jace brought up the rear, constantly scanning for any sign of pursuit. Their progress was slow but steady, each step taking them closer to their destination and further from the life Jace had known. Yet, as he watched T's determined little figure forging ahead through the snow, he felt no regret for the choice he had made. Some paths, once revealed, could not be ignored, not if you wanted to live with yourself afterward. They had covered perhaps 5 miles when Rufus suddenly froze, his ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ryle raised a hand, signaling an immediate halt. They stood motionless, barely breathing, as the sound that had alerted Rufus became audible to human ears. The soft whine of engines, growing steadily louder. "Searchcraft," Ryle whispered. "Into the trees. Now." They scrambled for cover beneath the dense branches of a massive pine, pressing themselves against its trunk as a sleek black vehicle passed overhead, its searchlights sweeping the forest floor in methodical patterns. T clutched the pouch containing the heart shard. Her eyes squeezed shut in concentration. Jace watched in amazement as the stone's glow, visible even through the fabric, dimmed to near invisibility. She was learning to control its energy output, to mask their presence. The search craft completed one pass, then another, its beams coming perilously close to their hiding place. Jace held his breath, one arm wrapped protectively around T's shoulders, the other hand buried in Rufus's fur to keep the dog still. After what seemed an eternity, the craft altered course, moving away toward the eastern ridge. They remained hidden for several minutes longer, ensuring it wasn't a feint designed to flush them out. "You controlled the heart shard," Ryle observed quietly to T, as they finally resumed their journey. "Your connection grows stronger." T nodded, her expression a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "I remember things. When I touch it, not my memories. Older." "The collective wisdom of your ancestors," Ryle confirmed. "The heart shard contains the essence of every ruler who carried it before you. Their knowledge, their experiences, all preserved to guide future generations." Jace, listening to this exchange, felt a renewed sense of the cosmic scale of their undertaking. This wasn't just about saving one child from pursuers. It was about preserving a dynasty, a way of governance that spanned millennia and affected countless lives across multiple star systems. They continued through the night, avoiding 2 more search patrols with similar tactics. By dawn, they had covered nearly half the distance to the beacon, but exhaustion was taking its toll, especially on T. Despite her determination, she was still a child, and her small body had limits. "We need to rest," Jace insisted, noting how T stumbled more frequently, her pace slowing despite her best efforts. Ryle scanned their surroundings, then pointed to a dense thicket of evergreens. "There, natural shelter, and the foliage will help mask our heat signatures." They created a small camp within the protective circle of trees, using thermal blankets to conserve body heat without risking a fire that might be detected. Jace distributed energy bars and water, ensuring T ate first. As T finally succumbed to exhaustion, curling up against Rufus's warm side, Jace and Ryle maintained watch, conversation limited to essential communication about their route and potential threats. After ensuring T was truly asleep, Jace turned to Ryle with questions that had been troubling him. "These slavers, you said they're mercenaries. But who exactly is this Imperial Regent they work for? What kind of person orchestrates the murder of an entire royal family?" Ryle's ancient eyes darkened with memory and anger. Merrick was chief scientific advisor to T's father, King Eldarion, a brilliant mind, but corrupted by ambition and a dangerous philosophy. He believes in absolute control through technological superiority, replacing the Elarian tradition of balanced governance with a technocratic dictatorship. And the resistance? Who leads them without the royal family? Former military leaders loyal to the crown, planetary governors who refuse to recognize Merrick's authority, common citizens who've suffered under his regime's crackdowns. Ryle explained. They maintain a fragmented but determined opposition, waiting for a symbol to unite behind. T, Jace said quietly. A child. A rightful heir, Ryle corrected gently. The heart shard recognizes her legitimacy, and among our people, that carries more weight than age or experience. She will have advisors, protectors, teachers, but her very existence represents continuity and hope. Jace gazed at the sleeping child, trying to reconcile these cosmic responsibilities with the small figure who had cowered in his barn just days ago. Can she have any kind of normal life with all this hanging over her? Ryle's expression softened. Normalcy is a luxury few royals ever experience, but she can have purpose, connection, even joy, especially with companions like you and Rufus, who see her as T first, Princess second. They fell silent, each lost in private thoughts as the brief winter day progressed toward afternoon. T slept deeply, her face peaceful for the first time since Jace had met her, as if some burden had been temporarily lifted in slumber. Their rest was cut short by Rufus's sudden alertness, his head lifting and ears swiveling toward some distant sound before the humans could detect anything amiss. "We need to move," Ryle said urgently, already gathering their supplies. "Something's coming." They roused T gently, but quickly, her transition from sleep to wary alertness happening in seconds, a child accustomed to danger. Within minutes, they were moving again, Ryle setting a faster pace despite the risk of leaving more noticeable tracks. The reason for their haste became apparent as they crested a small rise and gained a view of the valley behind them. In the distance, a line of dark figures moved through the snow, ground troops in formation, sweeping methodically through the area they had just vacated. "They're hurting us," Ryle observed grimly, "driving us toward something," as if confirming his assessment. They heard the distinctive whine of engines to their right, forcing them to veer left along a narrowing ridge. Ahead, the terrain became increasingly difficult, rocky outcroppings and steep drops replacing the more gradual forest slopes. "We're being channeled," Jace realized, his military training from decades past suddenly relevant. "They're using the landscape to limit our options." Ryle nodded, his expression grim. "Standard Imperial containment tactic. Create a corral, then close the trap." T looked between them, understanding despite her limited vocabulary. "What we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Ryle and Jace exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. They had come too far to be captured now, had risked too much. "We break pattern," Ryle decided. "Go where they don't expect." He pointed toward a sheer cliff face that dropped at least 100 feet to a frozen river below, a direction no rational fugitive would choose. "There's a maintenance path for the beacon," he explained quickly. "Cut into the rock face, nearly invisible unless you know it's there. Narrow, but passable." Jace eyed the cliff with trepidation. "You're sure?" "It's our only option," Ryle insisted. "The beacon is just beyond that ridge. If we can reach it, signal the resistance." His words were cut short by a piercing whine overhead. They looked up to see 3 Imperial searchcraft converging on their position, searchlights activating as they detected movement. "Run!" Jace shouted, grabbing T's hand. "Now!" They sprinted toward the cliff edge, Rufus bounding ahead as if sensing their destination. Behind them, shouts echoed as ground troops spotted their movement and began pursuit. At the cliff's edge, Ryle frantically searched the rock face, running his hands along seemingly solid stone until he found what he sought, a nearly invisible seam that marked the entrance to a narrow path cut into the vertical surface. "Here!" he called. "Quickly!" T went first, her small size an advantage on the precarious path. Rufus followed, surprisingly agile despite his age and recent injuries. Jace hesitated just long enough to see the first Imperial troops emerging from the tree line, weapons raised. "Go!" Ryle pushed him toward the path. "I'll hold them off." "Ryle, no," Jace began, but the Guardian cut him off. "The princess must reach the beacon," Ryle said firmly. "That is all that matters now. Go." Before Jace could protest further, Ryle turned to face the approaching troops, drawing a weapon from beneath his cloak, an ornate blade that hummed with energy as it activated. The last glimpse Jace had before descending onto the hidden path was of Ryle standing tall against their pursuers, a solitary figure silhouetted against the snow, the ancient guardian preparing for one final stand to protect his princess, with grief and determination warring in his heart. Jace followed T and Rufus along the treacherous path, each step taking them closer to their goal, and further from the loyal protector who had guided them this far. The hidden path carved into the cliff face was barely wide enough for a single person, forcing them to edge along sideways. backs pressed against cold stone as they navigated the precarious route. Far below, the frozen river glinted in the fading afternoon light, its surface a maze of cracks and pressure ridges. Above them, the sounds of conflict, energy weapons discharging, shouts of command, echoed briefly before being swallowed by the vastness of the mountain landscape. T moved with surprising confidence, her small hands finding secure grips where adult fingers might struggle. Rufus followed close behind her, his claws scraping against stone as he picked his way forward with canine determination. Jace brought up the rear, constantly glancing back for signs of pursuit, his heart heavy with the knowledge of Ryle's sacrifice. "Keep moving," he encouraged T when she paused to look back, her expression questioning Ryle's absence. "He wanted us to reach the beacon. We have to honor that." The path descended gradually, switchbacking down the cliff until it finally merged with a narrow ravine that provided better cover from aerial observation. As they reached this relative safety, a distant explosion shook the mountainside, causing small cascades of snow and rock to tumble down around them. T froze, her amber eyes wide with realization. "Ryle," she whispered, one small hand clutching the pouch containing the heart shard. Jace placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, finding no words adequate for the moment. After a brief pause to honor their fallen companion, they pressed on, the urgency of their mission now heightened by his sacrifice. The ravine led them through a labyrinth of rock formations, gradually ascending toward a ridge that Ryle had indicated was their destination. As twilight deepened into true darkness, the temperature plummeted further, their breath forming crystalline clouds with each labored exhalation. "How much farther?" T asked through chattering teeth, fatigue evident in her slowing pace. "Not far now," Jace assured her, though in truth, he was navigating by instinct and Ryle's hastily sketched directions. The beacon should be just beyond that ridge. They struggled up a steep incline, the snow deeper here, untracked by any previous passage. Rufus forged ahead, creating a path that T could follow more easily. Jace's wound throbbed with renewed intensity, the exertion and cold combining to test his endurance. As they crested the ridge, the landscape opened before them, a small plateau sheltered by towering pines, and at its center, a structure that might have been mistaken for a large boulder, if not for the subtle geometric angles that betrayed its artificial nature. "The beacon," Jace confirmed, relief flooding through him. "We made it." T approached the structure cautiously, the heart shard beginning to pulse with increased brightness through its pouch. She placed her small hand against the surface of what appeared to be solid stone, and to Jace's amazement, the material responded, flowing like liquid to reveal an entrance just large enough for them to duck through. Inside, the beacon station was austere but functional, a small space dominated by a control console, unlike any Earth technology Jace had seen. Symbols glowed with soft blue light, responding to T's presence even before she touched them. "Do you know how to use this?" Jace asked, watching as T studied the controls with intense concentration. She nodded slowly. "Heart shard knows," she replied, removing the glowing pendant from its pouch. "It remembers." T placed the heart shard in a recessed panel on the console that seemed designed precisely for it. The connection triggered an immediate response, the entire station humming to life, displays activating to show star charts and streams of data in an alien script. "Sending... call for help," T explained, her fingers moving across the controls with increasing confidence, guided by some intuitive or inherited knowledge. "To resistance." Jace watched in wonder as this child, who days ago had cowered in his barn, now operated advanced alien technology with the assurance of someone born to the task. The heart shard's glow synchronized with the console's pulsing lights, creating a hypnotic rhythm that filled the small space. "How long until they respond?" Jace asked, settling on the floor with his back against the wall. finally allowing himself to acknowledge his exhaustion. Not no, T admitted. Hours, maybe. Depends on ships. How close? Rufus padded over to Jace, settling beside him with a tired sigh. The loyal dog had pushed beyond his years and injuries throughout their journey, never faltering in his protection of T. Jace scratched behind his ears, murmuring words of appreciation. T joined them after ensuring the beacon was functioning properly, curling against Jace's other side. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the events of the past days catching up to them in this moment of relative safety. I miss Ryle, T said finally, her voice small in the quiet space. Me too, Jace agreed. He was very brave. He knew this would happen, T continued, surprising Jace with her insight. Last night, he told me, said his journey ends, but mine begins. Jace pondered this revelation. He completed his mission. He found you, protected you, brought you to where you needed to be. T nodded, her eyes wiser than her years. Now you protect me, she said simply. And Rufus. As long as you need us, Jace promised. Though he wondered privately what role a human farmer and an aging earth dog could possibly play in the cosmic drama unfolding around this child. Would they even be welcome among the resistance fighters T hoped would respond to their signal? As if sensing his doubts, T placed her small hand over his. Heartshard chose you too, she said with quiet certainty. Not mistake. Before Jace could respond, the console emitted a series of soft tones. T jumped up, returning to the controls with renewed energy. They answer, she exclaimed, her face illuminated by the changing patterns of light from the display. Resistance ship comes. 6 hours. Relief washed through Jace, though it was immediately tempered by practical concerns. Will we be safe here that long? The Imperials must know about this beacon. T's expression grew serious as she consulted the station's scanners. Imperial ships. Searching. Getting closer. She pointed to moving indicators on one of the displays. Need to hide beacon signal better. She worked quickly at the controls, her fingers dancing across symbols that rearranged themselves in response to her touch. The heart shard's glow intensified, seemingly enhancing or amplifying her commands to the system. Better now, she said after several minutes of concentrated effort. But still dangerous. Need to watch. Be ready. Jace nodded, pushing himself to his feet despite his body's protests. I'll take first watch at the entrance. You rest while you can. T looked as if she might argue, but exhaustion won out. She settled back beside Rufus, using the dog's warm body as a pillow. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed into the rhythm of sleep, the strain of their journey finally claiming its toll. Jace positioned himself near the entrance, where he could observe both the approach to the beacon station and the displays monitoring Imperial movements. The cold seeped through his clothing, but he welcomed it, using the discomfort to keep himself alert. As the hours passed, he found his thoughts turning toward what lay ahead. Soon, they would leave Earth behind, perhaps forever. The realization was both terrifying and oddly liberating. His life on the farm had been comfortable but empty, a holding pattern since Sarah's death. Now, improbably, he had found purpose again in protecting this extraordinary child. Whatever waited beyond Earth's atmosphere, whatever battles, challenges, or wonders, he would face them with the same determination that had brought them this far. For T's sake, for Rufus, for Ryle's memory, and perhaps most importantly, for himself. Outside, the stars shone brilliantly in the clear mountain air, no longer distant and unreachable, but destinations on a journey that had only just begun. The final hour of their wait stretched interminably, each minute crawling by with excruciating slowness. Jace maintained his vigil at the entrance, dividing his attention between the external sensors, showing Imperial search patterns, and the physical landscape visible through the station's small viewport. T had awoken from her brief rest and now stood beside him, the heart shard, once again, hanging around her neck. Its glow subdued but constant. "They're tightening the search grid," Jace observed, watching the methodical pattern of Imperial vessels on the display. "They must have some idea we're in this region." T nodded solemnly, her amber eyes reflecting the console lights. "Looking for beacon energy. Not exact yet." She pointed to a particular cluster of Imperial signatures, moving toward a location several miles distant. "They search Wrong Mountain first." "That buys us some time," Jace acknowledged. "But not much." "Resistance ship comes soon," T reassured him, indicating another indicator on the display, this one approaching from high orbit, its signature distinctly different from the Imperial vessels. 20 minutes. Rufus, sensing the increasing tension, stood at attention beside T, his aging body somehow straightening with renewed purpose. The bond between the dog and the alien child had deepened throughout their journey, transcending species and worlds. A simple, pure connection that asked nothing, but offered everything. The relative calm was shattered by a sudden alarm from the console. One of the Imperial search vessels had altered course, turning directly toward their location. "They found beacon signal," T said urgently, her hands flying across the controls. "Try to hide better." Jace moved to the viewport, scanning the night sky. In the distance, a pinpoint of light moved against the stellar backdrop, artificial, purposeful, growing larger by the second. "We're out of time," he said, turning back to T. "How close is our ride?" T checked the resistance ship's approach vector. "Still 15 minutes. Too long." Jace's mind raced through options. None of them good. If they abandoned the beacon station, they'd lose their only means of coordinating with the approaching resistance vessel. If they remained, they'd be trapped when the Imperial ship arrived. "Can we send a message?" he asked. "Tell the resistance ship to meet us somewhere else?" T shook her head. "Beacon fixed. Can't move signal." She paused, her young face set in concentration. "But can make Imperial ship go away. For short time." Before Jace could ask what she meant, T removed the heart shard from around her neck and held it in both hands. Her eyes closed in deep concentration, and the stone began to pulse with increasing intensity, waves of blue-violet energy radiating outward. "T, what are you—" Jace began, but fell silent as he felt the air pressure in the station shift, his ears popping painfully. Outside, the night sky distorted as if viewed through rippling water. The approaching Imperial ship suddenly veered off course, its engines flaring erratically as it encountered whatever force T had unleashed. "Energy shield," T explained, her voice strained with effort. "Pushes away, but hurts heart shard. Can't do long." Indeed. Jace could see fine fracture lines appearing within the glowing stone, its light flickering as if struggling to maintain the protective barrier. T's small face was contorted with concentration and pain, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. "That's enough," Jace urged, reaching for her. "You're hurting yourself." T shook her head stubbornly. "Need more time," she insisted. "For resistance to come." The minutes stretched painfully as T maintained the protective field, each one visibly draining her. The heart shard's glow became increasingly erratic, the fractures within it spreading. Jace watched helplessly, torn between admiration for her determination and fear for her well-being. Finally, blessedly, a new alert sounded from the console, different from the warning signals. This one a series of melodic tones that seemed to rejuvenate T instantly. "They're here!" she exclaimed, releasing the heart shard from its focused task. The stone dimmed immediately, the fractures within it slowly beginning to heal as its normal function resumed. Through the viewport, Jace saw a new vessel descending toward them, sleeker than the Imperial ship, with flowing lines that somehow reminded him of underwater creatures. It settled on the plateau, outside the beacon station with barely a sound, its hull shimmering with iridescent patterns that seemed to blend with the surrounding landscape. "Come," T said, gathering the heart shard and moving toward the entrance. "Friends." Jace followed, Rufus at his heels, as the station's door flowed open once more. Outside, cold mountain air rushed to greet them, carrying the scent of pine and snow, and something else, a subtle tang of ozone that emanated from the resistance ship. The vessel's side panel dissolved rather than opened, revealing an interior illuminated with the same soft blue light as the beacon station. A figure emerged, tall and graceful, with features similar to T's, but more mature, clad in a form-fitting uniform that shimmered like liquid metal. "Princess," the newcomer said, bowing deeply with one hand pressed to their chest. "I am Captain Alara of the Resistance vessel Stardancer. We've come to bring you home." T stepped forward, the heart shard glowing warmly against her chest. "Captain," she acknowledged, her voice suddenly carrying a formality that surprised Jace. "Thank you for answering our call." Captain Alara's gaze shifted to Jace and Rufus, curiosity evident in her expression. "You bring companions from this world?" "They protected me," T said firmly. "Saved me from slavers. They come with us." For a moment, Alara seemed about to object, but something in T's stance, a subtle shift in posture that conveyed unexpected authority, silenced any protest before it formed. "As you wish, Princess," Alara said with another slight bow. "But we must depart immediately. Imperial forces have detected our arrival and are converging on this location." As if to emphasize her point, a distant rumble echoed across the mountains, the sound of Imperial engines pushing to maximum thrust as they altered course toward the beacon. "Ryle?" Alara asked, looking past them as if expecting another figure to emerge from the station. T's expression faltered, grief momentarily replacing her newfound poise. "Sacrificed, so we could reach Beacon." Alara's features softened with genuine sorrow. "He was the finest of guardians. His memory will be honored among the Resistance." She gestured toward the ship's open doorway. "Please, we must board now." Jace hesitated, the reality of leaving Earth striking him with sudden force. His entire life had been bound to this planet, his memories, his identity, everything he knew and understood. With one step through that doorway, he would become something unprecedented in human history, a traveler to distant stars, entangled in a conflict beyond his world's knowledge. T sensed his hesitation and turned back, extending her small hand toward him. "Jace," she said simply, "come." It was enough. He took her hand, and with Rufus pressing reassuringly against his leg, they followed Captain Alara into the Stardancer. The interior of the vessel was unlike anything Jace could have imagined. Organic and technological elements blended seamlessly, creating an environment that felt simultaneously alien and oddly comforting. The walls pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, while transparent displays floated in midair, responding to the crew's gestures without physical contact. The ship's crew, 6 individuals with variations of T's species characteristics, regarded the Earth visitors with undisguised curiosity. They bowed respectfully to T, the gesture containing both formal deference and genuine emotion. This was clearly more than simple protocol. Her survival represented something precious to them all. "Secure for immediate departure," Alara ordered, guiding them to what appeared to be a central command area. "Imperial vessels will be within weapons range in 3 minutes." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing across intangible control interfaces. Jace felt a subtle vibration through the deck as the ship's systems engaged, a sensation more felt than heard. "You might want to secure yourselves," Alara advised, indicating contoured seating areas that materialized from the ship's floor. "Atmospheric exit can be disorienting for those unaccustomed to space travel." T settled into one of the seats, which adjusted automatically to her small frame. Rufus hesitated, then positioned himself at her feet, somehow sensing that remaining close to her was the safest option. Jace lowered himself into an adjacent seat, marveling as it conformed perfectly to his body, support structures emerging to cradle him securely. Through a large viewport, he watched as the snowy landscape dropped away beneath them, the Stardancer rising with astonishing speed, yet virtually no sensation of movement. Within seconds, they were above the cloud layer, the stars above growing sharper and more brilliant as the atmosphere thinned. "Imperial vessels adjusting course to intercept," reported one of the crew, a slender individual monitoring a complex three-dimensional display. "Calculating optimum evasion trajectory. Deploy countermeasures and prepare for jump sequence," Alara commanded. "Plot coordinates for the sanctuary node." Jace felt T's small hand find his, gripping with surprising strength as the ship accelerated. Outside the viewport, Earth's curve became visible, the blue-white planet suspended against the infinite black, growing smaller by the second. "Your world is beautiful," Alara observed, noticing Jace's fixed gaze. "Few planets have such abundance of water and life." Jace could only nod, words failing him as he watched his homeworld recede. Everything he had ever known, every human who had ever lived, contained in that shrinking sphere. The enormity of what was happening threatened to overwhelm him. "Imperial vessels launching pursuit craft," announced another crew member. "Intercept in 45 seconds. "Initiate jump preparations," Alara ordered calmly. "Shunt power from secondary systems." The ship's interior lighting dimmed slightly, as energy redirected to what Jace assumed were the primary engines, or whatever technology allowed them to travel between stars. The displays surrounding them pulsed with increasing speed, symbols flowing in cascades that were meaningless to him, but clearly significant to the crew. "Will they catch us?" T asked, her voice small but steady. "No, Princess," Alara assured her with confidence. "The Stardancer was built for situations exactly like this. We'll be within jump range in 20 seconds. Through the viewport, Jace caught glimpses of light flaring in the distance, the Imperial pursuit craft burning hard to close the gap. The Stardancer responded with a surge of acceleration that should have crushed them with G-forces. Yet the seats compensated perfectly, the only indication of their speed being the rapidly diminishing size of Earth in the viewport. "Jump sequence initiating," announced the pilot, their hands moving in complex patterns through the holographic controls. "Fold integrity at optimal levels." Alara turned to them, her expression solemn. "The first jump can be disorienting, especially for species unaccustomed to fold space transit. You may experience temporary sensory distortions." Before Jace could ask what that meant, the stars outside the viewport seemed to stretch, reality itself bending around the ship. A sensation that defied description washed over him, as if every atom in his body was simultaneously compressed and expanded, examined and rearranged. Colors that had no names flooded his vision, and sounds that couldn't exist filled his ears. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion ceased. Outside the viewport, a completely different starfield greeted them. No sign of Earth, the sun, or any familiar constellation. They had crossed an unimaginable distance in what felt like seconds. Rufus whined softly, pressing closer to T's legs. The dog seemed as disoriented as Jace felt, but was recovering quickly, his resilience once again surprising. "Where are we?" Jace managed to ask, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Approximately 12 light-years from your solar system," Alara replied matter-of-factly. "We've entered a region known as the Boundary Veil, a stellar nursery that interferes with Imperial scanning technology. We'll be safe here while we prepare for the longer journey to the sanctuary node." T released her grip on Jace's hand, her amber eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the spectacular vista outside, swirling clouds of cosmic dust illuminated from within by newly forming stars, creating a tapestry of light and color unlike anything visible from Earth. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," Alara agreed with a gentle smile. "It is, and a fitting first sight of the greater universe for you, Princess. Your father often said that beauty must be preserved even in times of conflict, perhaps especially then." T's expression softened at the mention of her father, grief and curiosity mingling in her features. "You knew my father, the king?" "I served in the royal guard for many cycles before joining the resistance," Alara confirmed. "Your father was a wise ruler and a good man. The empire prospered under his guidance." A crew member approached respectfully. "Captain, the princess and her companions should rest while we calculate the next jump coordinates. We've prepared quarters for them." Alara nodded. "An excellent suggestion. It's been a long journey already, and there is much further to go." She led them through corridors that seemed to form ahead of their steps and seal behind them, the ship's interior reconfiguring itself to create the most efficient path. Eventually, they reached a section that felt somehow more permanent, living quarters designed with both functionality and comfort in mind. "These will be your chambers during our journey," Alara explained, indicating a doorway that irised open at their approach. "The environment has been adjusted to match Earth atmospheric conditions for your comfort." Inside, they found a spacious suite with 3 distinct areas: sleeping quarters, a refreshment station that seemed to function as both kitchen and bathroom, and a common area with comfortable seating. Like the rest of the ship, the design blended organic and technological elements in ways that felt simultaneously alien and intuitive. "Rest now," Alara advised. "When you're ready, the ship's systems can provide nourishment appropriate for your species. Simply indicate your needs verbally, and the environmental systems will respond." She turned to leave, then paused. "Princess, when you've rested, the command staff would appreciate a briefing on your experiences. There is much we need to discuss regarding the Resistance's next steps." T nodded solemnly, the weight of responsibility settling visibly on her small shoulders. "I will come soon." After Alara departed, Jace sank onto one of the seating surfaces, which adjusted to support his exhausted body perfectly. Rufus padded around the chamber, sniffing curiously at the unfamiliar surroundings, before finally settling beside T as she explored the food dispensing system. "Hungry?" T asked, turning to Jace with a small container that had materialized from what looked like solid wall a moment before. Jace accepted it gratefully, finding something that resembled a nutrient bar, but tasted surprisingly like fresh bread and honey. Familiar flavors recreated through utterly alien technology. For Rufus, the system produced something akin to meat, which the dog consumed with appreciative enthusiasm. As they ate in companionable silence, the enormity of their situation began to truly register with Jace. They were on a spaceship, 12 light-years from Earth, involved in an interstellar conflict centered around the small child sitting across from him. Every science fiction story he'd ever encountered paled in comparison to the reality he now inhabited. "T," he said finally, setting aside his empty container. "I need to understand better what's happening. What does the Resistance expect from you? You're just a child." T's amber eyes met his, carrying wisdom beyond her years. "Not just child, last royal. Heartshard chose me." She touched the pendant, which had regained its steady glow. "Empire needs balance. Merrick wants control only. Many people suffer. But why you? Why not some adult who could lead them more effectively?" "Blood matters," T explained simply. "Tradition matters. Heartshard only works for royal family, connects to ancestors." She hesitated, searching for words. "I am symbol first, leader later, when older." Jace nodded slowly, beginning to understand. T represented legitimacy, continuity, a rallying point for those who oppose the current regime. Her youth was less important than her lineage and her connection to the Heartshard. "And us?" he asked, gesturing to himself and Rufus. What happens to us in all this? T's expression softened, vulnerability replacing the formality she had shown earlier. You stay with me, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. My family now. The simple declaration touched Jace deeply. Whatever cosmic drama they had been swept into, whatever political machinations surrounded them, this core truth remained. They had formed a bond that transcended species and worlds. Unlikely companions united by circumstance. Now, family by choice. Okay, he said, reaching out to ruffle Rufus's fur. We stay with you, no matter what comes next. T's smile illuminated her face, banishing momentarily the weight of her responsibilities. In that instant, she was simply a child again, relieved, grateful, and not quite so alone in an overwhelming universe. Outside their quarters, the Star Dancer continued its calculations, preparing for the next phase of their journey toward the sanctuary node, and whatever awaited them among the stars. Jace woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where he was until his eyes adjusted to the gentle bioluminescence of the chamber walls. The ship's environmental systems had adjusted to an Earth-like day-night cycle, gradually dimming during their rest period and now brightening to simulate dawn. T was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her sleeping platform, with the heart shard held before her in cupped hands. Her eyes were closed in concentration, the stone's blue-violet light pulsing in perfect rhythm with her breathing. Rufus lay nearby, watchful but relaxed, apparently having adapted to their extraordinary circumstances with typical canine resilience. "Good morning," Jace said softly, not wanting to disturb T's meditation. She opened her eyes, the heart shard's glow dimming to its normal intensity. "Morning," she replied with a small smile. "Sleep good?" "Better than I expected," Jace admitted, surprising himself with the truth of it. Despite everything, the jarring transition to space travel, the overwhelming strangeness of their situation, he had slept deeply, perhaps aided by the ship's environmental controls, or simply from sheer exhaustion. "Ship says food ready," T informed him, carefully returning the heart shard to its place around her neck. "And Captain Alara wants to see us. Meeting with resistance leaders." Jace nodded, rising to prepare himself for whatever the day might bring. The refreshment area provided something that functioned like a shower, though the cleansing medium wasn't quite water, more like a momentary field of energy that left him feeling refreshed and clean without ever being wet. When they had all eaten, Rufus again receiving some synthesized approximation of meat that he found entirely satisfactory, a chime sounded at the chamber entrance. "Princess," came Alara's voice, "are you and your companions prepared for the council meeting?" T straightened her posture, a subtle transformation coming over her as she once again assumed the mantle of her royal heritage. "We are ready," she confirmed. The door irised open to reveal Alara waiting in the corridor, now dressed in a more formal uniform that emphasized her role as ship's captain, rather than the rescue operative of the previous day. "The Resistance leadership awaits via secure transmission," she explained, as she guided them through the ship. Not all could attend in person, given the risks of gathering in one location, but representatives from each major faction will be present virtually. They entered what was clearly a conference chamber, a circular room dominated by a large, holographic projection platform in its center. Around the edges, several of the Star Dancer's crew were already seated, along with two individuals whose elaborate attire suggested higher rank or special status. "May I present General Corax?" Alara indicated a broad-shouldered figure, with elaborate scarring across one side of his face, marks of honor rather than injury. Jace surmised. "Commander of our military operations." Corax inclined his head respectfully toward T. "Princess, your survival brings hope to our forces." "And High Counselor Vela," Alara continued, gesturing to an elderly female whose silver-streaked hair was elaborately braided with symbolic patterns. representative of the civilian government in exile. Vela's bow was deeper, almost reverent. Your Highness, words cannot express what your presence means to those who have remained loyal to your father's vision. T acknowledged both with a formal nod that seemed practiced, as if ancient memories were guiding her movements. Thank you for your loyalty, she said, her voice carrying a gravity that belied her years. And for never losing hope. She then gestured to Jace and Rufus. My protectors, Jace and Rufus of Earth. They saved me from slavers. They are to be respected as my personal guard. Jace felt a surge of pride at T's declaration, though he wondered how an aging farmer and his dog could possibly serve as meaningful protection among beings with such advanced technology. Nevertheless, he straightened his posture and nodded acknowledgement to the assembled leaders. We welcome all allies in our struggle, General Korak stated, though his tone suggested some reservation about these unusual additions to their ranks. Alara guided them to seats positioned prominently within the circle. We'll begin the transmission momentarily. Princess, the leadership will wish to hear your account directly, but do not feel obligated to relive traumatic details if you prefer not to. T nodded her understanding, her small hand finding Jace's for reassurance as the holographic system activated. The air above the central platform shimmered, then resolved into the images of 6 additional figures, diverse in appearance but united by the formal attire that marked them as resistance leadership. Each wore a subtle emblem that Jace assumed represented different planets or factions within their alliance. Transmission secure, announced a crew member. Quantum encryption holding steady. We are honored to present Her Royal Highness, Princess Tavalia Aldarian, rightful heir to the 12 systems, Alara announced formally. T rose from her seat, the heart shard glowing visibly through her clothing. Though small, and still wearing the earth clothes provided by Jace, she somehow projected a presence that filled the chamber. Regal, determined, the embodiment of the hope these people had clung to. I live, she stated simply. Heartshard lives. Empire will be restored. A ripple of emotion passed through both the physical attendees and the holographic figures. Relief, joy, renewed determination visible in their expressions. The prophecy holds true, murmured one of the holographic leaders, an ethereal figure with translucent skin. The shard found its bearer. Tell us, Princess, urged another, leaning forward eagerly. How did you escape the palace? We received reports that no survivors remained after the Regent's purge. T's expression darkened at the memory, but she maintained her composure. Nursemaid Lyra hid me in escape pod, programmed for nearest safe world. Her voice caught slightly. She died protecting me. Her sacrifice will be honored in the restoration, vowed General Korax. As will Guardian Riles. The princess was pursued to Earth by slaver units, Alara added, filling in details that T might not know how to express. According to our intelligence, the Regent has deployed his elite hunters to every possible destination within the pod's range. It was fortune or fate that she found protectors on this primitive world. Jace might have taken offense at the description of Earth as primitive under different circumstances, but from their perspective, it was simply accurate. Instead, he focused on the implications of what Alara was saying. These elite hunters, he asked, speaking for the first time. They're still searching other planets. General Korax nodded grimly. The Regent will not rest until he possesses the Heart Shard. It is the only legitimate claim to imperial authority. Without it, his rule remains technically provisional, subject to challenge under ancient law. Which brings us to our most pressing concern, interjected one of the holographic figures, a stern-faced individual with metallic implants, visible along their jawline. The princess's safety must be our highest priority. The sanctuary node is no longer secure. We have intelligence suggesting Imperial forces have identified its location. A murmur of alarm spread through the gathering. "Is this confirmed?" demanded High Counselor Vela. "Not with absolute certainty," the implanted figure replied. "But the risk is too great. We cannot bring the princess to our primary base if there's any chance it has been compromised." "Where, then?" asked Alara. "The Star Dancer cannot remain in transition space indefinitely. We need a destination." The Leadership Council fell into urgent discussion. Various alternatives proposed and dismissed as too dangerous, too remote, or too vulnerable to Imperial detection. Jace listened with growing concern, realizing that despite their advanced technology and organization, the Resistance was in a precarious position, outnumbered, outgunned, forced to operate from the shadows against an enemy that controlled the resources of 12 star systems. Throughout the debate, T remained silent, her amber eyes moving from speaker to speaker, absorbing the complex political and strategic considerations being discussed. Finally, she raised one small hand, and the chamber immediately fell silent. "Heartshard shows way," she said with quiet confidence. "Not sanctuary node. Different place." She closed her eyes briefly, communing with the ancient artifact. "Place of beginning. First throne." The announcement produced visible shock among the Leadership Council. High Counselor Vela was the first to recover her composure. "The ancestral seat?" she asked incredulously. "But Princess, it was abandoned centuries ago when the Empire expanded. It's deep within Imperial territory now." "Last place they look," T replied with simple logic. "Hide in plain sight." General Corax leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "The strategy has merit. Imperial forces would never expect us to bring the princess to a location so close to their power centers. And the ancient defenses of the ancestral seat were formidable. Some may still function. It's also rich in the same mineral compounds that shielded the beacon station on Earth," added Alara, comprehension dawning in her features. "If we could reactivate the old protection grid, it might mask the Heartshard's energy signature." The council members exchanged glances, a new energy infusing their discussion as they considered this unexpected possibility. Jace watched with growing amazement as T's simple suggestion transformed the strategic landscape. This child, guided by some combination of intuition and ancient wisdom channeled through the Heartshard, had offered what their experienced military and political leaders had overlooked. "It will require careful planning," conceded the stern-faced holographic figure. "And a small team. Too many ships would attract attention." "I volunteer the Star Dancer for this mission," Alara stated firmly. "My crew is experienced in covert operations, and we're already transporting the princess." General Corax nodded approval. "You'll need specialized equipment to reactivate the ancient systems, and additional security personnel." "I have Jace and Rufus," T interjected, her tone brooking no argument. "Trust them with my life." Jace felt a surge of protective determination at her words, though he remained acutely aware of how ill-equipped he was for the role being thrust upon him. What could a human farmer contribute to an interstellar conflict, fought with technology centuries beyond Earth's development? As if sensing his thoughts, T's small hand found his again, squeezing with reassurance. Her message was clear. His value wasn't in technological expertise or military training, but in the loyalty and care he had already demonstrated. Sometimes, the simplest virtues were the most needed, even in the most complex conflicts. The council meeting continued for another hour. Details of the mission to the ancestral seat discussed and refined. Jace struggled to follow all the technical and strategic elements, focusing instead on what he could understand: the risks, the timeline, the basic objectives. By the time the transmission ended and the holographic figures faded, a plan had been established. "We'll alter course immediately," Alara announced. "With favorable jump conditions, we should reach the outer boundary of the ancestral system in approximately 72 hours. As the conference chamber emptied, T remained seated, her expression pensive. Jace stayed beside her, waiting until they were alone, save for Rufus before speaking. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. "It sounds dangerous." T nodded, one hand absently stroking Rufus's fur. "Heart shard shows truth. Ancestral seat. Calls to me." She looked up at him, her amber eyes ancient and young simultaneously. "Will you still come? Even to dangerous place?" Jace smiled, ruffling her hair in a gesture that momentarily bridged the gap between the royal heir and the child she still was. "Where you go, we go. That's what family does." T's answering smile was like sunrise after the longest night, bright with hope and the simple joy of not facing the universe alone. Outside the viewport, the swirling stellar nursery of the Boundary Veil began to recede as the Star Dancer adjusted course, its advanced engines preparing for the series of jumps that would take them deep into the heart of Imperial territory, toward an ancient throne and a destiny waiting to be reclaimed. The journey to the ancestral seat unfolded across 3 days of space travel, unlike anything Jace could have imagined. The Star Dancer made a series of calculated jumps through fold space, each transition bringing them closer to their destination, while carefully avoiding Imperial patrol routes and monitoring stations. Between jumps, T spent hours with Captain Alara and other senior crew members, receiving briefings on Imperial politics, resistance operations, and the history of her own royal lineage, filling gaps in her knowledge caused by her abrupt evacuation and time on Earth. Despite her youth, she absorbed the complex information with remarkable comprehension, occasionally surprising her teachers with insights that seemed to come from the heart shard's connection to ancestral memories. Jace, meanwhile, found himself drawn to the ship's observation deck, a transparent dome that offered unobstructed views of the cosmos. Here, he could begin to grasp the true scale of the universe they traversed. Nebulae stretched across light years, their colorful gases birthing new stars. Binary systems orbited in perfect celestial dance, planets of impossible composition, gas giants with ring systems that would make Saturn seem modest. Ocean worlds entirely covered in liquid. Desert planets scorched by twin suns, passed in distant panorama. Rufus often accompanied him, the loyal dog seemingly as fascinated by the stellar vistas as his human companion. They would sit together for hours, Jace processing the radical transformation of his existence, while Rufus offered the simple comfort of familiar presence. On the final day before their arrival, T joined them on the observation deck, settling cross-legged beside Jace as they watched the approaching outline of a spiral galaxy arm. "Beautiful," she said simply, the heart shard glowing softly against her chest.
"It's incredible," Jace agreed. "I never imagined I'd see such things. Back on Earth, I thought I'd live and die on that farm, never traveling farther than the next state."
T tilted her head, considering his words. "Miss Earth?" Jace considered the question carefully. "Parts of it," he admitted. "The simplicity, knowing what each day would bring, the smell of fresh-cut hay in summer." He smiled ruefully. "But I don't miss the emptiness. The feeling that my life had stopped after Sarah died." "Sarah?" T questioned.
"My wife," Jace explained, surprised to find the pain of her memory had softened. "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer, a disease our medicine couldn't cure."
T nodded solemnly.
"I lost family too. Remember Mother's laugh, Father's stories at night." Her small face grew distant with memory.
"Miss them, but have new family now." She leaned against him, and Rufus shifted to rest his head on her lap, creating a moment of quiet connection amid the vastness of space. Their peaceful interlude was interrupted by Captain Alara's arrival, her expression serious, but not alarmed. "Princess, we're approaching the outer boundary of the ancestral system," she reported. "We'll make our final jump in 1 hour. I thought you might wish to prepare." T nodded, rising gracefully. "Thank you, Captain. We will be ready." After Alara departed, T turned to Jace with unexpected solemnity. "Dangerous now," she said. "When arrive, Imperial ships may be close. Need to be careful." "What can I do?" Jace asked, keenly aware of his limitations in this environment. T considered for a moment. "Stay close. Watch. Trust feelings." She touched the heart shard gently. "Sometimes, it speaks to those near me. Might show you things." Before Jace could ask what she meant, a ship-wide announcement requested all personnel to prepare for final jump procedures. They returned to their quarters, where Alara had arranged for appropriate attire, clothing that would allow them to blend in should they encounter Imperial citizens or functionaries at their destination. For T, this meant a simple but elegant outfit that subtly incorporated royal symbols without being ostentatious enough to attract attention. For Jace, a utilitarian uniform similar to those worn by civilian security personnel throughout the Empire. Even Rufus received a collar with embedded technology that Alara explained would help mask his non-native biosignature from Imperial scanners. "The ancestral seat is technically a historical preserve," Alara explained, as they prepared. "Limited tourism is permitted under strict Imperial supervision. Our cover story, should we be challenged, is that we are a private research team with authorization to study the ancient architecture." She provided them with identification documents, forgeries so perfect that Jace couldn't imagine how they might be detected. "These will scan as legitimate in any standard Imperial checkpoint. Just remember your assigned identities and follow my lead if we encounter officials." When the final jump announcement came, they secured themselves in the command center, wanting to witness their arrival at this historically significant destination. The now familiar sensation of fold space transition washed over them. The momentary disorientation, the impossible colors, the feeling of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Then reality reasserted itself, and through the viewport, they beheld the ancestral seat. Not a single structure as Jace had imagined, but an entire planetoid, its surface dominated by sprawling architectural complexes that gleamed with ancient grandeur, even from orbit. "The birthplace of the Alarian Empire," Alara said reverently. "Where the first emperor united the original three systems under one rule, establishing the foundation for everything that followed." T stood transfixed, the heart shard pulsing with increased brilliance as they approached the historic world. "Home," she whispered, though she had never set foot on this planet in her life. "Ancient home." Scans show minimal Imperial presence," reported the Stardancer's sensor operator. "Standard historical site security only. One patrol vessel in high orbit. Automated monitoring stations. No elite units detected. The Regent believes the princess would never return to such an obvious location," Alara observed with satisfaction. "Your instincts were correct, Your Highness." T nodded, but her attention remained fixed on the approaching world. Her expression, one of profound recognition, as if she were seeing not just with her own eyes, but through the accumulated memories of generations stored within the heart shard. "We'll approach the southern hemisphere," Alara explained, indicating a region on the tactical display. "The oldest sections of the royal complex are there, including the original throne chamber. Imperial tourism is restricted to the newer northern sections, so we should encounter minimal oversight." The Stardancer descended through the planetoid's thin atmosphere, its advanced stealth systems ensuring they appeared as nothing more than routine traffic on Imperial monitoring. As they dropped lower, details of the landscape became visible. Massive architectural structures of impossible design, some stretching kilometers into the sky, others embedded deep into the planetoid's surface. Many showed signs of their extreme age, yet remained hauntingly beautiful. Their original purpose lost to all but the most dedicated historians. They set down in a secluded valley, surrounded by towering spires of crystal and metal, a landing zone that offered both concealment from orbital observation and proximity to their target. As the engines powered down, a tangible tension filled the command center. They had successfully penetrated the heart of Imperial territory, but the most dangerous part of their mission still lay ahead. From this point forward, we maintain communication silence except in emergencies, Alara instructed. The landing team will consist of myself, the princess, her Earth companions, and 2 security specialists. The rest of the crew will remain with the ship, prepared for immediate extraction if needed. T stood at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the ancient structures beyond. The heart shard glowed with steady purpose, seeming to resonate with the very ground beneath the ship. "It remembers," she said softly. "Stone remembers. Metal remembers." She turned to face them, her amber eyes luminous with certainty. "We will find throne room. Heart shard will show way." As the landing ramp extended and the thin, cold air of the ancestral seat rushed in to meet them, Jace felt a shiver that had nothing to do with temperature. They were about to walk into the birthplace of an interstellar empire, guided by a child and an ancient artifact, hunted by forces with vastly superior resources and technology. Yet as Rufus pressed reassuringly against his leg and T's small hand found his, he realized he wouldn't trade this moment, this impossible adventure, for the safe, empty existence he had left behind. Whatever dangers awaited in the ancient halls ahead, they would face them together. The party disembarked, their footsteps echoing on stone that had supported the weight of history for millennia. Above them, the impossibly tall spires of the ancestral seat reached toward unfamiliar stars, while before them stretched a pathway worn smooth by the passage of countless feet, leading inward, downward, toward the heart of an empire waiting to be reclaimed. The ancient pathways of the ancestral seat wound between towering structures that defied conventional architectural understanding, buildings that seemed to flow rather than stand, their surfaces inscribed with intricate patterns that might have been decorative or functional or both. Despite thousands of years of exposure to the elements, the materials showed minimal degradation, testament to the advanced technology of the early empire. T led their small group with unexpected confidence, the heart shard guiding her through the labyrinthine complex as if she had walked these paths 1,000 times before. Captain Alara and the 2 security specialists, Mira and Torin, maintained vigilant watch for any sign of Imperial presence, while Jace and Rufus stayed close to T, the dog's acute senses providing additional security that even the advanced technology of their companions couldn't match. The original throne chamber should be approximately 2 kilometers ahead, Alara informed them in a hushed voice, consulting a small, holographic map projected from her wrist device. These outer sections were administrative buildings and ceremonial spaces. T nodded absently, her attention focused on something only she could perceive. "Heart shard pulls stronger," she said. "Wants to go home." They continued through a series of increasingly elaborate archways and corridors, the architectural style growing more primal and powerful as they penetrated deeper into the ancient complex. Occasionally, they would pass fragments of art or inscriptions that caused T to pause, her head tilting as if listening to voices only she could hear. "What do you see?" Jace asked during one such moment, as T stood transfixed before a wall covered in spiraling symbols. "Stories," she replied softly. "Old kings, old wars, old peace." She touched the wall gently. "Heart shard remembers all, shows me." Their progress slowed as they entered what appeared to be a central ceremonial avenue, a vast processional way flanked by towering statues of previous rulers, each holding a representation of the heart shard before them. The actual stones beneath their feet were worn into shallow depressions by millennia of ceremonial processions. "The Walk of Ascension," Alara explained reverently. Every ruler in the history of the Empire walked this path to receive the Heart Shard and take the throne. T stepped onto the ancient processional way with visible emotion, her small figure dwarfed by the massive statues of her ancestors. The Heart Shard's glow intensified, casting long shadows behind the statues and creating an almost supernatural atmosphere.
"I feel them," she whispered, "all watching."
Jace felt it too, an unmistakable sense of presence, as if the very air around them was charged with awareness. Even Rufus seemed affected, his posture alert but not alarmed, ears pricked forward as if listening to sounds beyond human perception. They continued along the processional way, passing dozens of royal statues representing thousands of years of continuous rule. Near the end, however, they encountered a jarring sight. A massive statue had been toppled, its stone features deliberately defaced, the carved representation of the Heart Shard broken away. "Your father," Alara said softly. "The regent ordered all representations of the previous king destroyed after the coup." T stopped before the vandalized monument, her expression a mixture of grief and determination. She reached out one small hand to touch the fallen statue's base, the Heart Shard flaring briefly in response. "Will restore," she promised quietly. "All will be restored." Beyond the desecrated statue lay their destination, a structure unlike any they had passed before, where the outer buildings had been impressive but essentially comprehensible. This final edifice defied conventional understanding. Its surfaces seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, angles that should have been impossible somehow resolving into a coherent whole. The entrance was a perfect circle of darkness that absorbed rather than reflected light. "The first throne chamber," Alara breathed, awe evident in her voice. "Few living beings have seen this place in centuries." The regent restricted access after claiming power. T approached the circular entrance without hesitation, the Heart Shard's glow illuminating the impossible darkness. As she neared the threshold, the darkness seemed to recognize her, or more specifically, the artifact she carried. The perfect circle rippled like disturbed water, then resolved into a passageway that hadn't been visible before.
"It responds to the Heart Shard,"
Mira observed, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon.
"Ancient security protocol?"
"Yes," T confirmed, knowledge flowing from the artifact to her mind. "Recognizes true air, allows passage." They entered the revealed corridor, which spiraled gently downward into the planetoid's crust. Unlike the weathered surfaces of the outer complex, these walls gleamed as if newly created. Their material, neither stone nor metal, but something that seemed to exist at the boundary between solid matter and energy. The passageway eventually opened into a vast circular chamber, dominated by a central dais, upon which sat a structure that barely qualified as a throne in conventional terms. More a crystalline formation that rose organically from the floor, shaped to support a humanoid form while also incorporating complex patterns that mirrored the Heart Shard's internal structure. Surrounding the dais in concentric circles were tiered platforms where, presumably, advisors and witnesses would stand during royal audiences or coronations. The entire chamber was illuminated by light that seemed to have no specific source, creating an atmosphere of timeless suspension. As T stepped into the chamber, the ambient illumination intensified, and subtle harmonics filled the air. Not quite sound, not quite vibration, but something that resonated with the Heart Shard she carried. The artifact responded, its glow brightening until it nearly outshone the chamber's own light. "It remembers," T said, her voice carrying strange overtones in the acoustic perfection of the space. "Throne remembers Heart Shard. Heart Shard remembers throne." She approached the central dais slowly, each step deliberate and ceremonial, though she had received no instruction in the proper protocol. The knowledge simply flowed through her from the artifact, guiding her movements as it had guided countless rulers before her. Jace and the others remained at the chamber's periphery, instinctively understanding that what they were witnessing was sacred in some fundamental way, a connection between ruler and realm that transcended ordinary politics or power. As T ascended the dais and stood before the crystalline throne, the heart shard suddenly detached itself from its setting around her neck, floating freely before her. The artifact rotated slowly, its internal patterns shifting into new configurations as if awakening from long dormancy. "What's happening?" Jace whispered to Alara, concerned by this unexpected development. "I'm not sure," the captain admitted. The ceremonial text described the heart shard's response to the throne room, but few living beings have witnessed it. This is knowledge lost to most of our people. On the dais, T stood with perfect composure as the floating heart shard completed its reconfiguration. Then, with a soft chime that resonated throughout the chamber, it returned to her, settling not around her neck, but into her outstretched palms. "System awake," she announced, her voice carrying that same strange harmonic quality. "Ancient defenses online. Heart shard connected to planetary grid." As if in response to her words, previously invisible patterns illuminated across the chamber's walls and floor, a complex network of energy pathways extending outward through the entire complex. The throne itself began to glow with the same blue-violet light as the heart shard, establishing a visible connection between the artifact and its ancient home. "The protection grid," Alara realized with growing excitement. "It's reactivating automatically. This is beyond what we hoped for. The entire ancestral seat will now mask the heart shard's energy signature." "And provide early warning of Imperial approach," added Torin, studying the expanding network of light with professional appreciation. "These are defensive systems far beyond current technology." T descended from the dais, the heart shard once again secured around her neck, but now pulsing with renewed vigor. Her bearing had subtly changed, still a child, but now visibly connected to something ancient and powerful that lent her a presence beyond her years. "Safe here," she declared with quiet certainty. "For now. Can establish resistance base. Plan restoration." Alara nodded, already activating her secure communication device to inform the Stardancer's crew of their success. "We'll begin bringing in essential personnel and equipment immediately. Within days, we can have a functioning command center established." As the others busied themselves with the logistical details of establishing their foothold in this historic location, Jace knelt beside T, bringing himself to her eye level. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, noting the subtle strain around her eyes despite her composed exterior. "This is a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone your age." T's formal demeanor softened slightly, allowing the child beneath the royal air to show through. "Tired," she admitted. "Heart shard shows much. Hard to understand all." She leaned against him briefly, seeking comfort. "But not alone. Have you and Rufus." Rufus, hearing his name, pressed against T's side supportively, earning a small smile and gentle pat from the young princess. "You're never alone," Jace assured her, feeling a surge of protective determination. Whatever role fate had assigned him in this cosmic drama, he would fulfill it to the best of his ability, not for empires or thrones, but for the child who had crashed into his life on a snowy night and changed everything. In the days that followed, the ancient halls of the ancestral seat gradually transformed from abandoned historical site to bustling resistance headquarters. Captain Alara coordinated the arrival of key personnel and equipment, all transported with elaborate precautions to avoid Imperial detection. The Stardancer made multiple journeys to collect resistance leaders from various hiding places throughout the 12 systems, bringing them to this most unexpected of sanctuaries. Jace found himself assigned quarters adjacent to T's in what had once been the royal residential complex, chambers that had housed the first emperors of the Ilarian dynasty. Despite their ancient origin, the rooms adjusted to their new occupants with unsettling intelligence. environmental systems activating after millennia of dormancy to provide perfect comfort. Throughout this transition, T divided her time between formal education sessions with various resistance experts, learning the complex politics, history, and protocols she would need as the figurehead of their movement, and quieter moments with Jace and Rufus, where she could briefly set aside the weight of her responsibilities and simply be a child. One evening, approximately 2 weeks after their arrival, Jace found T sitting alone in a small courtyard garden that had inexplicably begun blooming shortly after the Heart Shard's reconnection with the throne. Plants that had been dormant for centuries now displayed vibrant colors and subtle bioluminescence, creating a peaceful oasis amid the otherwise austere surroundings. "Hiding?" Jace asked gently, settling beside her on a bench formed from the same strange matter-energy boundary material as the throne. T smiled tiredly. "Just thinking. So much to learn." "You're doing amazingly well," Jace assured her. "I've seen how the resistance leaders look at you, with genuine respect, not just because of your title." "Heartshard helps," T admitted, touching the artifact that rarely left her possession. "Shows me what to say sometimes, how to act." She sighed softly. "But hard to be princess and child both." Jace nodded understanding. In the brief time since their arrival, he had watched T transform from a frightened fugitive to a poised young royal whose words carried weight among beings centuries her senior. It was an impossible burden for one so young, yet she bore it with remarkable grace. "You don't have to be the princess all the time," he reminded her. "Not with me and Rufus." T's expression lightened at that. "True. With you. Just T." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the arrival of General Corax, his imposing figure appearing at the garden's entrance with characteristic military precision. "Princess," he acknowledged with a respectful inclination of his head. "Earth Guardian," he added, nodding to Jace with what might have been growing acceptance. "General," T responded, straightening slightly, but maintaining the more relaxed demeanor she allowed herself in Jace's presence. "News? The Council request your presence," Corax reported. "Our intelligence networks have intercepted disturbing information. The Regent has initiated something called protocol sundering. Our analysts are uncertain of its exact nature, but it appears to be connected to the Heart Shard in some way." T's expression grew serious, the child receding as the royal heir emerged once more. "I will come," she said, rising from the bench. She glanced at Jace questioningly. "Of course I'm coming too," he confirmed before she could ask. Falling into step beside her, as they followed General Corax to the makeshift council chamber established in what had once been a royal audience hall. Inside, they found the resistance leadership gathered around a holographic display showing complex data streams and intercepted Imperial communications. High Counselor Vela greeted T with a formal bow, then immediately addressed the matter at hand. "Princess, our infiltration units within the Imperial Science Division have forwarded fragments of a highly classified project initiated by Regent Merrick himself," she explained, gesturing to the swirling data. "We believe it represents a direct threat to the Heart Shard and potentially to yourself." T approached the display, studying it with focused attention. "Explain," she requested simply. A slender resistance operative with specialized analytical implants stepped forward. "The Regent has assembled a team of the Empire's most advanced theoretical physicists and artifact specialists. Based on the resource allocations and security protocols, they appear to be developing some method to neutralize or possibly duplicate the Heart Shard's functions." "Impossible," stated one of the elder counselors dismissively. "The Heart Shard cannot be replicated. Its connection to the royal bloodline is unique and irreproducible." "Perhaps," the analyst acknowledged. "But the Regent clearly believes otherwise. The project has received unlimited funding and priority access to restricted technologies from the ancient archives." T had gone very still, her expression distant as she communed with the heart shard. "It fears," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Heart shard. Afraid." The declaration sent a chill through the assembled leadership. If an artifact that had survived millennia of wars, political upheavals, and attempted usurpations now registered fear, the threat must be unprecedented. "Can you tell us more?" Captain Alara asked gently. "What specifically concerns the heart shard about this protocol?" T closed her eyes, concentrating on the information flowing from the ancient artifact. "Separation," she said, after a long moment. "Protocol sundering tries to cut connection between heart shard and bloodline, between heart shard and throne." The implications struck the council like a physical blow. The legitimacy of rule within the Alarian Empire had always been verified through the heart shard's response to royal blood. It was the foundation upon which their entire governmental system rested. If the regent found a way to sever that connection, or worse, to redirect it to himself, "This cannot be allowed to proceed," General Corax declared firmly. "We must locate this research facility and destroy it before they can complete their work." "Agreed," said High Counselor Vela. "But our intelligence is incomplete. We know the project exists, but not its location. The Regent has compartmentalized the information extensively. We need more data," Captain Alara concluded. "A targeted infiltration of the Imperial Science Division's central database." As the Leadership Council debated strategies for obtaining this critical intelligence, Jace observed T's growing distress. Though she maintained her composure outwardly, he could see the tension in her small frame, the way her hand clutched the heart shard as if afraid it might be torn away at any moment. He moved closer, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "We won't let them succeed," he promised quietly. T looked up at him, genuine fear visible in her amber eyes. "If they break connection, everything lost. Not just throne. Heart shard holds memories, knowledge, history of my people." Before Jace could respond, an urgent communication interrupted the council session. One of the Stardancer's crew appeared in holographic form, their expression tense. "Captain, our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in orbital space," they reported. "Multiple vessels approaching on trajectories consistent with Imperial military formations. They're still beyond standard detection range, but their course suggests they're heading directly for the ancestral seat." The council chamber erupted in urgent activity. "How were we discovered?" demanded General Corax. "The protection grid should have masked our presence." "Unknown, General," the crew member responded. "But the vessel configurations match Imperial elite units, not standard patrol forces." Captain Alara turned to T, her expression grave. "Princess, we must consider immediate evacuation. If these are indeed elite units, they may be specifically hunting for you and the heart shard." T stood motionless for a moment, communion with the heart shard evident in her distant gaze. Then she shook her head firmly. "Cannot," T insisted, though her voice had weakened to barely more than a whisper. "If shield falls, all lost." Rufus whined anxiously, pressing against T's legs as if trying to share his strength with her. The loyal dog's concern mirrored Jace's own growing panic as he watched T struggle against this invisible assault. "There must be something we can do," he appealed desperately to the resistance leaders. "Some way to counter this protocol sundering." General Corax shook his head grimly. "Without knowing the specific technology they're employing, we have no defense prepared. Our scientists warned this might be possible in theory, but none believed the Regent could develop it so quickly. On the tactical displays, the shield's deterioration accelerated. Imperial forces were already moving into position to exploit the growing weaknesses, preparing for the moment when the ancient protection would fail completely." T sank to her knees despite Jace's supporting arm. her connection to the heart shard visibly weakening as protocol sundering continued its insidious attack. The artifact now pulsed with painful irregularity, each flicker causing T to gasp as if experiencing physical pain. "Please," Jace begged her, his own heart breaking at her suffering. "Let it go. We'll find another way." T's amber eyes met his, filled with determination despite her agony. "Cannot. Abandon. Duty," she managed between labored breaths. "Must. Protect." But even as she spoke, her connection to the heart shard faltered further. The shield outside began to collapse in sections, allowing Imperial forces to advance cautiously toward the outer structures of the ancestral seat. "Imperial troops breaching perimeter," called out a tactical officer. "Estimate 17 minutes until they reach the throne chamber." In the midst of this crisis, Rufus suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward with intense focus. He gave a single, sharp bark that drew everyone's attention, then moved with unexpected purpose toward one of the command center's auxiliary displays, one showing energy patterns throughout the complex. "What's he doing?" Captain Alara asked, momentarily distracted from the tactical situation. Jace watched in confusion as Rufus pawed insistently at a specific section of the display, a subsystem that appeared to be independent of the main shield network. "I think he's trying to tell us something," Jace said, moving to examine what had caught the dog's attention. High Counselor Vela joined him, her ancient eyes widening as she recognized the pattern Rufus had identified. "The heart chamber," she breathed. "Of course, the deepest level beneath the throne room. It's where the first heart shard was created, before being divided for the royal bearers." T looked up weakly, her interest captured despite her struggle. "Heart chamber?" "A sacred place mentioned only in the oldest texts," Vela explained urgently. "The source of the heart shard's power, connected to the planet's core energies, if you could reach it." Understanding dawned on T's face, knowledge flowing from the failing heart shard. "Renewal," she whispered. "Reconnection." With what seemed like tremendous effort, she pushed herself to her feet, still clutching the flickering artifact. "Must go. To heart chamber. Now." General Korax shook his head forcefully. "Impossible. We have no way to hold back the Imperial forces long enough for you to reach it, let alone complete whatever ritual might be required." "I'll take her," Jace declared without hesitation. "Rufus found this connection. He can help us find the way." Captain Alara studied the complex's schematics quickly. "There's a direct passage from the throne room to the deeper levels. If you move now, while we deploy our forces to create a defensive perimeter—" "Do it!" T commanded with unexpected authority, her royal heritage shining through despite her weakened state. "Prepare defense. Buy time." The resistance leaders exchanged glances, then nodded in unified decision. General Korax immediately began issuing orders to concentrate their forces around the throne room and adjacent corridors, creating layers of defense to slow the Imperial advance. "We'll hold them as long as possible," he promised T. "But whatever you need to do in this heart chamber, it must be done quickly." Jace lifted T into his arms. She was too weak now to walk unaided. The protocol sundering's attack draining her strength along with the heart shard's power. Rufus led the way as they hurried from the command center, following High Counselor Vela, who guided them toward the hidden passage. Behind them, the sounds of battle began to echo through the ancient halls as Imperial forces penetrated deeper into the ancestral seat. The resistance fighters were buying time with their lives, holding positions against numerically superior forces with advanced weapons. They reached the throne room to find it eerily quiet, the crystalline structure still glowing faintly, despite the heart shard's weakened state. High Counselor Vela moved directly to the dais, her hands passing over the throne's surface in a specific pattern that seemed half-remembered, half-intuitive. "The texts speak of a path that only royal blood can open," she murmured, searching. A way to the heart of creation itself. T stirred in Jace's arms, pointing weakly to a specific section of the throne. There, she whispered. Blood. Calls to blood. Vela followed her direction, finding an almost invisible seam within the crystalline structure. Princess, you must activate it yourself. Only your touch will be recognized. Jace carried T to the throne, setting her gently on her feet before it. With trembling hands, she placed her palm against the indicated section. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The heart shard's flickering had grown so severe that it seemed almost extinguished. Then, responding to some quality in T that transcended the artifact's failing power, the throne began to shift. The crystalline structure flowed like liquid, revealing a spiraling pathway that descended deep into the planetoid's interior, a passage that had remained sealed for millennia. Go, urged High Counselor Vela, already moving back toward the entrance where the sounds of battle grew closer. I will join the defense. May the wisdom of your ancestors guide you. Jace lifted T once more, and with Rufus leading the way, they began their descent into the ancient passage. The way was illuminated by a soft bioluminescence that responded to their presence, brightening as they passed and dimming behind them. The air grew warmer as they descended, carrying scents that seemed oddly familiar, yet impossible to identify, like memory given fragrance. T's condition worsened with each level they descended. The heart shard's connection to her was being systematically attacked by the Regent's protocol sundering, each disruption causing her visible pain. Yet, she remained conscious, occasionally whispering directions when the path branched or indicating when certain symbols on the walls held significance. Almost there, she managed after what seemed an eternity of descent. Feel it, calling. The passage finally opened into a vast spherical chamber, unlike anything Jace had ever seen or imagined. The walls, floor, and ceiling, if such terms even applied to this perfect sphere, were composed of the same crystalline material as the throne. But here it pulsed with inner light that seemed alive in some fundamental way. At the chamber's center floated what appeared to be a miniature star, a concentrated point of energy that illuminated the space with shifting patterns of blue, violet, and colors Jace had no names for. The heart, T whispered in awe. Source of all shards. Rufus approached the chamber's center cautiously, his behavior suggesting he sensed something beyond human perception. He turned back to T, whining softly in encouragement. Jace set T gently on her feet, supporting her as she took unsteady steps toward the floating energy nexus. The heart shard around her neck responded to proximity, its erratic pulsing gradually synchronizing with the larger energy source, despite the distant influence of protocol sundering. What do we do now? Jace asked, completely out of his depth in this realm of ancient power and forgotten knowledge. T didn't answer immediately, her attention fixed on the floating energy nexus. The heart shard lifted slightly from her chest, drawn toward its parent source like a child seeking comfort. Reconnection, she said finally. Heart shard must touch heart, be whole again. She reached up with trembling hands, removing the artifact from around her neck. As she held it before her, Jace could see how profoundly its condition had deteriorated. Fracture lines spread throughout its structure, its once vibrant glow now sporadic and feeble. Will this hurt you? He asked, concern overwhelming his awe of their surroundings. T shook her head slightly. Unknown, ancient texts, unclear, but only way. With determination that belied her weakened state, T stepped forward, holding the heart shard toward the floating energy nexus. As the two sources of power neared each other, arcs of energy began to leap between them, creating a web of light that surrounded T. Stand back, she warned Jace, her voice suddenly stronger. Not safe. Reluctantly, Jace retreated to the chamber's edge, Rufus pressing against his leg as they watched T approach the final connection. The energy arcs intensified, lifting T slightly from the ground as the heart shard moved of its own accord from her hands to hover directly before the larger nexus. For a breathless moment, time seemed suspended. Then, with a sound like a crystal bell struck by lightning, the heart shard merged with the floating energy source. Light exploded outward, temporarily blinding Jace despite his raised arm. When his vision cleared, he beheld a transformation beyond comprehension. The chamber had become a swirling vortex of power, with T suspended at its center. The heart shard no longer existed as a separate entity. Instead, T herself glowed with the same blue-violet light, as if the artifact's essence had been absorbed directly into her being. Her amber eyes had become luminous pools of energy, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the chamber like music.
"I understand now,"
she said, her words clear despite the maelstrom of energy surrounding her. The heart shard was never meant to be separate. It was a fragment, a tool to guide the bearer to this place when needed. She extended her hands, and the energy responded, forming patterns in the air that Jace somehow recognized as representations of stars, planets, entire systems, a map of the Empire and beyond. "Protocol Sundering cannot touch me now," T continued, her voice containing knowledge far beyond her years. "The connection is not through the shard anymore. It is through me." As if in response to her words, the entire ancestral seat shuddered. Above them, Jace knew, without seeing, that the ancient shield was reactivating, not from the heart shard's power this time, but directly from the source, channeled through T herself. "We need to go back," Jace urged, uncertain what was happening to the child he had sworn to protect. "The others need help." T nodded, the swirling energy beginning to subside around her. As it did, Jace saw that she remained physically unchanged despite the power she now channeled. Still a small girl with determined eyes and a gentle spirit, only now carrying something vastly more significant than the physical artifact she had worn. "Yes," she agreed, her voice returning to its normal timbre as her feet touched the ground once more. Time to end this. They ascended the spiral passage much faster than they had descended, T now moving with renewed strength and purpose. Rufus bounded ahead, seemingly energized by the chamber's power, or perhaps simply by T's recovery. When they emerged into the throne room, they found it transformed into a battlefield. Resistance fighters had created a defensive perimeter around the dais, exchanging fire with Imperial troops who had breached the outer defenses. General Korax himself stood at the front line, his uniform scorched from near misses, rallying his outnumbered forces. As T stepped into view, a wave of energy pulsed outward from her form, momentarily freezing the conflict as all combatants turned to witness her transformation. No longer weak or uncertain, she stood with quiet authority, her small figure somehow commanding the entire space. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chaotic scene. "No more bloodshed in this sacred place." The Imperial troops hesitated, weapons still raised, but no longer firing as they assessed this unexpected development. Their commanding officer, a tall figure in elite armor, stepped forward cautiously. "By order of Regent Merrick, I demand you surrender the heart shard," he declared, though his voice lacked conviction in the face of what he was witnessing. T regarded him calmly. "There is no heart shard to surrender," she replied. "Not anymore." She raised her hands, and throughout the ancestral seat, ancient systems awakened fully for the first time in millennia. The throne room's crystalline walls began to pulse with light that spread outward, flowing through corridors and chambers in expanding waves. Outside, the shield that had been faltering under Protocol Sundering's attack suddenly flared with renewed power, not just re-establishing its previous protection, but expanding to encompass a far greater area. The Imperial ships in low orbit found themselves encapsulated within the energy field, their weapons and engines suddenly inoperative as the ancient defense system neutralized all hostile technology within its influence. In the command center, the tactical displays showed this dramatic reversal with perfect clarity. The Regent's flagship itself, caught within the expanding shield, drifted powerless. Its advanced systems, including the protocol sundering technology, rendered useless by defenses created long before the current empire was established. T walked forward through the frozen battlefield, resistance and Imperial forces alike parting before her as she approached the central communications array. With a gesture, she activated a direct channel to the Regent's flagship, now visible on all displays throughout the complex. Regent Merrick's face appeared, his composed facade cracking for the first time as he confronted a situation beyond his careful calculations. "What have you done?" he demanded, genuine alarm evident in his voice. "What my ancestors intended," T replied simply. The heart shard was never the source of royal authority. It was merely a key, guiding the worthy back to the true source when needed. She regarded him with surprising compassion for one who had orchestrated her family's destruction. "You sought to control what you did not understand, to replace wisdom with domination." The Regent's expression hardened. "Pretty sentiments from a child playing with ancient toys. This changes nothing. My forces still control 12 systems. This single planetoid, however historically significant, is strategically irrelevant." "Is it?" T asked, and with another gesture, activated the full communication network of the ancestral seat, a system that bypassed standard Imperial protocols to broadcast directly to every world in the 12 systems. Throughout the Empire, on planets and stations and vessels across vast distances, trillions of beings suddenly witnessed their princess, standing in the ancestral throne room, glowing with power that the oldest among them recognized from ancient texts and traditions. "People of the 12 systems," T addressed them, her voice carrying the perfect blend of royal authority and compassionate concern. "For too long, you have suffered under a regime that values control above compassion, efficiency above freedom. The Regent seized power through betrayal and murder, destroying your rightful government and my family." Images began to appear alongside her, evidence compiled by resistance intelligence, showing the truth of the coup, the calculated elimination of the royal family, the systematic suppression of dissent that followed. The Empire's citizens, many already harboring doubts about the Regent's legitimacy, now faced incontrovertible proof of his treachery. "I do not ask you to fight for me," T continued. "I ask you to stand for yourselves, for the values my father championed: liberty, compassion, and the right of all beings to determine their own governance." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the 12 systems, spontaneous demonstrations erupted, citizens taking to the streets, military units standing down or openly declaring for the princess, planetary governors announcing their repudiation of the Regent's authority. In the throne room, the Imperial troops lowered their weapons one by one, many kneeling in formal recognition of T's legitimacy. Their commanding officer removed his helmet, revealing a face conflicted between duty and awakening conscience. "Your Highness," he said finally, placing his weapon on the ground before him, "the Imperial Elite Guard awaits your command." The Regent's face contorted with fury as he witnessed this defection. "This is treason," he shouted. "I am your lawful ruler. I brought order and progress to systems drowning in outdated traditions." "You brought fear and control," T corrected gently. "And now it ends." With a final gesture, she terminated the connection to the Regent's flagship. Throughout the ancestral seat, Imperial forces were laying down arms, many requesting amnesty and the opportunity to pledge loyalty to their rightful princess. General Korax approached T, genuine awe tempering his usual military bearing. "Princess, shall we take the Regent into custody?" His flagship is completely neutralized by the ancient shield. T considered this for a moment, then shook her head. No. He must face justice, but not through force. Restore minimal power to his vessel, enough for life support and limited propulsion. Let him return to the imperial capital. Seeing the surprise on the general's face, she explained, I will not begin my restoration with an act of vengeance, however justified. The people have seen the truth. They will determine his fate through proper legal channels. High Counselor Vela, who had survived the battle with only minor injuries, smiled with approval. Wisdom beyond your years, Your Highness. Your father would be proud. T's composure finally cracked slightly at the mention of her father, grief momentarily visible in her luminous eyes. I hope so, she said softly. As the immediate crisis subsided and the resistance began the complex process of establishing security throughout the ancestral seat, T finally allowed herself a moment of quiet withdrawal. She found a small alcove overlooking the ancient complex, away from the urgent activity and constant demands for decisions. Jace found her there, Rufus already faithfully at her side. He sat beside her without speaking, offering silent companionship as she processed everything that had occurred. I'm different now, she said finally, looking down at her hands where occasional flickers of blue-violet energy still danced beneath her skin. Not just T anymore. You're still you, Jace assured her. Just more. She nodded slowly, considering this. Heart still inside, with all memories, all knowledge. She looked up at him, suddenly vulnerable despite her newfound power. Sometimes overwhelming, hard to remember which thoughts are mine and which are ancestors. Jace understood her struggle more than she might have expected. That's why you need people around you who knew you before, who see T, not just the princess or the heart's vessel. People like you, she said with a small smile. And Rufus. Exactly. Jace placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're still family, no matter what. That hasn't changed. T leaned against him, taking comfort in the simple human contact. Rufus rested his head on her lap, offering his own steady reassurance. For a moment, they were just what they appeared to be, a man, a child, and a dog, connected by bonds that transcended the cosmic drama surrounding them. What happens now? Jace asked eventually, gazing out at the ancient structures now bustling with resistance personnel being transformed into a provisional government. Restoration, T replied. Not just of throne, of balance, father's vision. She looked up at him, determination replacing her momentary vulnerability. Need to visit all 12 systems, show people their princess lives, bring hope. A grand tour of the Empire, Jace mused, trying to imagine the scale of such an undertaking. Quite a change from a quiet farm on Earth. T's expression grew concerned. You still come, even though different now, even though dangerous still. Jace smiled, ruffling her hair in the familiar gesture that never failed to remind her of her remaining childhood beneath her royal responsibilities. Of course we're coming. Where you go, we go. Isn't that what we decided? Rufus barked once in apparent agreement, tail wagging against the ancient stone floor. T's answering smile illuminated her face, momentarily eclipsing the otherworldly glow of the power she now contained. In that instant, Jace saw both versions of her simultaneously, the frightened alien child he had discovered in his barn on a snowy night, and the royal heir who would lead an interstellar empire toward a more compassionate future. Both were T. Both were precious, and both would continue to need the simple, steadfast love that he and Rufus had offered from the beginning, a love that asked nothing, expected nothing, but gave everything. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the ancestral seat, illuminating the ancient spires with golden radiance. A new day was beginning, not just for them, but for 12 star systems and trillions of beings who would soon learn that their princess had returned, carrying not just the symbolic heart shard, but the very essence of their shared history and potential future. As they watched the sunrise together, T's small hand found Jace's larger one, a connection that bridged worlds, species, and the vast gulf of space itself. Whatever challenges awaited in the restoration to come, they would face them as they had faced everything since that snowy night, together. In the vastness of the universe, with all its wonders and terrors, perhaps that was the greatest power of all, the simple, unbreakable bond between unlikely companions who had become family through choice rather than circumstance. A bond that, like the heart itself, transcended time, space, and even understanding, yet remained as real and vital as the beating of their hearts. The heart shard was gone, merged back into its source, but its essence lived on in T, in Jace, in Rufus, and in the countless beings across 12 systems who now looked to the ancestral seat with renewed hope. A princess, a farmer, and a dog, an unlikely family that had changed the fate of an empire. The story had only just begun. Run. Ancestral seat protects us. Has defenses not used in centuries. With respect, Princess, General Korax interjected. We cannot risk your capture. The resistance would be finished if the regent obtained the heart shard. Not suggesting capture, T clarified, new determination straightening her small shoulders. Suggesting fight. Here, where heart shard's strongest. She approached the central dais, where tactical displays showed the approaching Imperial forces. Heart shard connected to throne now, can activate deeper defenses, systems unseen for many generations. The resistance leaders exchanged uncertain glances, torn between respect for the ancient wisdom channeling through their young princess and practical military considerations. What exactly can these deeper defenses do? Captain Alara asked carefully. Shield entire complex, T explained, her knowledge clearly coming from the heart shard rather than her own experience. Disrupt Imperial technology. Create safe space. High Counselor Vela stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. The ancient texts do speak of defensive capabilities beyond our current understanding. If the princess can truly access these systems through the heart shard's connection to the throne, it would give us time, General Korax acknowledged. Time to gather our scattered forces, to strengthen our position here. Or time to discover the location of protocol sundering, added Captain Alara, and neutralize that threat before it can be deployed. Decision crystallized among the leadership with remarkable speed, testament to their growing faith in T's connection to the ancient wisdom of her lineage. Instead of evacuation, they would prepare for defense, trusting in the forgotten technologies of the ancestral seat to protect them from the approaching Imperial forces. As the council dispersed to prepare, Jace found himself once again alone with T and Rufus in the rapidly emptying chamber. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "We could still leave, find somewhere else to hide." T shook her head, certainty radiating from her small form. "No more hiding, no more running." She looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the determined spirit that had brought her from terrified fugitive to royal heir in mere weeks. Time to stand. Here, where it all began. Together. They made their way back to the throne chamber, where T would attempt to activate the ancient defenses that might be their only hope against the approaching storm. Behind them, resistance forces prepared for battle, while above, Imperial ships closed the distance to the ancestral seat, bringing with them a confrontation that would determine not just their own fates, but the future of 12 star systems and billions of lives. The first throne chamber hummed with energy as T approached the crystalline structure at its center. The heart shard pulsed against her chest, its glow intensifying with each step she took toward the ancient seat of power. Jace and Rufus, watched from a respectful distance, along with Captain Alara, General Corax, and High Counselor Vela, the only witnesses permitted to this sacred interaction. "How much time do we have?" Jace asked quietly, as T ascended the dais. "The Imperial fleet will achieve orbital position in approximately 40 minutes, Alara replied, her voice equally low. Their ground forces could deploy shortly thereafter. On the dais, T stood before the throne, her small figure somehow commanding despite her youth. As before, the heart shard detached from its setting around her neck, floating before her at eye level. But this time, rather than simply reconfiguring itself, the artifact expanded its energy field, creating a swirling matrix of light that surrounded T completely. "What's happening?" Jace asked, alarm rising in his voice as T's form became obscured within the luminous cocoon. "The heart shard is interfacing directly with her consciousness," High Counselor Vela explained, her tone reverent. "It is a deep communion rarely attempted, even by adult rulers. The strain on her mind must be immense." Inside the energy field, T stood with arms outstretched, her head tilted back as information and power flowed between her and the ancient artifact. The throne beneath her began to respond, its crystalline structure emitting harmonics that resonated throughout the chamber and beyond, vibrating through the very foundations of the ancestral seat. Suddenly, the floor beneath them illuminated with intricate patterns, not just the defensive grid they had seen activated upon their arrival, but deeper, more complex systems that spread outward from the throne in concentric waves of power. The walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing layer upon layer of energy matrices extending throughout the entire complex and deep into the planetoid itself. "The ancient shield," breathed High Counselor Vela, recognizing what they were witnessing from historical texts. Not seen in 15 generations. It was thought to be merely legendary. The illuminated patterns continued to spread, floor by floor, building by building, until the entire ancestral seat pulsed, with blue-violet light visible even from orbit. Above them, a dome of energy began to form, encapsulating the complex in a protective barrier that shimmered with the same distinctive hue as the heart shard. Within the energy cocoon, T remained suspended in communion with the artifact, her small body occasionally trembling with the effort of channeling such power. Jace watched with growing concern, wondering at what cost this protection came. "Is she safe?" he demanded of the others. "This looks like it's hurting her." "The texts speak of the burden of deep communion," Vela admitted, "but they also say the heart shard protects its chosen bearer. It would not allow permanent harm to come to her." Jace was not entirely reassured, but before he could press further, the energy cocoon surrounding T began to dissipate. The heart shard returned to its position around her neck, though its glow remained intensified. T herself stood unsteadily on the dais, visibly exhausted but conscious and aware. "Ancient shield! Activated!" she managed to say before her legs buckled beneath her. Jace rushed forward, catching her before she could fall. She felt unnaturally light in his arms, as if the energy transfer had temporarily diminished her physical presence. "You did it," he told her, cradling her gently. "Rest now." "Cannot rest," she insisted weakly. "Must monitor shield, direct defenses." "The princess is right," General Corax said, approaching with reluctant admiration in his scarred features. "The ancient shield requires continuous guidance from the heart shard's bearer. It is not autonomous." "She's just a child," Jace protested. "She needs to recover." "I am princess first," T reminded him softly, though she made no attempt to leave the security of his arms. "Child second. Duty now." A communication alert interrupted their exchange. A resistance operative reporting from the complex's newly activated command center. "Imperial vessels have established high orbit," they announced. 5 capital ships and numerous support craft. They appear to be deploying dropships for ground assault. "Let them come," General Corax responded with grim satisfaction. They'll find the ancestral seat less welcoming than they expect. T stirred in Jace's arms, her strength gradually returning. Take me to Command Center, she requested. Need to see battle. Direct shield. Though reluctant. Jace recognized the determination in her voice. This was her choice, her burden to bear. He helped her to her feet, supporting her as they made their way to the command center, established in what had once been a royal war room. Rufus padded faithfully alongside them, his protective instincts heightened by T's vulnerable state. The command center buzzed with controlled urgency as Resistance personnel monitored the approaching Imperial forces. Holographic displays showed multiple dropships descending toward the ancestral seat, carrying what sensors indicated were elite Imperial troops, the Regent's personal guard, specialists in artifact retrieval and high-value target acquisition. They're heading for the primary ceremonial approach, reported a tactical officer. Classic containment formation. T moved to a central platform that had adjusted itself to her height, allowing her to view the tactical displays clearly. The heart shard pulsed steadily against her chest, seemingly responding to her focused attention. Shield ready, she announced, placing both hands on a control surface that illuminated beneath her touch. When close enough, the Resistance forces watched in tense anticipation as the Imperial dropships entered the atmosphere, their trajectories locked on the ancient complex. Ground-based Resistance fighters had taken defensive positions throughout the outer structures, prepared for conventional combat should the shield fail to repel the attackers. As the first dropships approached the perimeter of the ancestral seat, T closed her eyes in concentration. The heart shard flared brilliantly, and throughout the command center, personnel reported energy spikes across all monitoring systems. Outside, the shield, previously visible only as a faint shimmer in the air, suddenly intensified. When the lead Imperial dropship attempted to penetrate this barrier, it encountered not solid resistance but something far more insidious, a field of disrupted physics that caused its navigation and propulsion systems to fail simultaneously. The ship veered wildly off course, its pilots clearly struggling to maintain control as it crashed beyond the complex's boundaries. Similar fates befell the next wave of dropships, each encountering catastrophic system failures upon approaching the shield. Those that managed to pull back in time retreated to a safe distance, their commanders presumably reassessing their approach. "It's working!" exclaimed Captain Alara, genuine amazement in her voice. "The shield is neutralizing their technology without direct confrontation." T nodded, though the effort of maintaining the shield's precise calibration was visibly taxing. "Ancient defense," she explained between controlled breaths, "disrupts energy patterns, makes technology confused." The Imperial forces, however, were nothing if not adaptable. After the initial failed approach, they altered their strategy. Instead of attempting to penetrate the shield directly, they established positions just beyond its boundary, deploying heavy energy weapons that began bombarding the barrier with sustained fire. Testing shield strength, General Korax observed grimly. "Looking for weaknesses." T's expression tightened as the bombardment intensified. The heart shard's glow fluctuated slightly with each impact, suggesting that maintaining the shield against such assault required active resistance rather than passive protection. "Can withstand," she assured them, though beads of sweat had formed on her forehead. "Shield absorbs energy, grows stronger." Indeed. The more the Imperial forces fired upon the barrier, the more it seemed to solidify and intensify, the blue-violet hue deepening with each absorbed blast. This apparent paradox clearly confused the attackers, whose fire eventually slackened as they reassessed. "They're withdrawing to secondary positions," reported a sensor operator. "Regrouping." A moment of relative calm descended upon the command center, allowing T to briefly relax her intense concentration. Jace immediately moved to her side, offering water and support. "You need to rest," he urged quietly. Even for a few minutes. T shook her head stubbornly.
Cannot. If connection breaks, shield falls.
She looked up at him, fatigue evident in her amber eyes despite her determination.
But maybe sit?
Jace helped her to a seat, where Rufus immediately positioned himself at her feet, his loyal presence offering comfort even in these extraordinary circumstances. T absently stroked the dog's fur as she monitored the tactical displays, drawing strength from the simple, grounding connection to her Earth companions. The respite was brief. Within minutes, the Imperial forces launched a new approach, smaller, faster craft, attempting to identify potential weak points in the shield's coverage. These probing attacks were followed by concentrated fire on specific coordinates, suggesting a methodical attempt to map the barrier's properties. They're being directed by someone who understands ancient technology, High Counselor Vela observed with concern. These are not standard Imperial tactics. As if confirming her assessment, a new holographic alert appeared, a massive Imperial vessel breaking from high orbit to assume a lower position directly above the ancestral seat. Designation confirmed, reported a communications specialist, their voice tense. It's the Implacable, the Regent's personal flagship. The announcement sent a ripple of heightened alert through the command center. If Regent Merrick himself had arrived, the stakes had just increased dramatically. T's reaction was immediate and visceral, a combination of fear and determination that caused the heart shard to pulse erratically.
He comes, she whispered. For heart shard, for me.
Jace placed a protective hand on her shoulder. He won't get either, he promised, though he questioned how much protection he could truly offer against the ruler of 12 star systems. The tactical situation evolved rapidly after the Regent's arrival. The probing attacks ceased, replaced by a more sophisticated approach, specialized equipment being deployed just beyond the shield's boundary, devices that seemed designed to analyze rather than attack the ancient defense system. They're mapping the shield's frequency patterns, Captain Alara realized with growing alarm. If they can identify its fundamental harmonics, they might calibrate weapons to the same frequency, General Corax finished grimly. Penetrate rather than overwhelm. T's expression showed she understood the danger perfectly. The shield operated on principles that, while advanced, were not incomprehensible to the Empire's best scientists, especially not to Merrick, who had served as chief scientific advisor before his coup. Need to change patterns, T announced, returning to the control platform despite her fatigue. Shield can adapt, become unpredictable. She placed her hands once more on the illuminated surface, the heart shard flaring as she initiated a deeper connection with the ancient defense system. Throughout the ancestral seat, the shield's energy signature began to shift and flow, its patterns becoming fluid rather than fixed, a constantly moving target that would resist simple frequency matching. The effort, however, clearly demanded even more from T than maintaining the static shield had. Her small frame trembled with exertion, and Jace noticed with alarm that the heart shard's glow occasionally dimmed, as if struggling to provide the necessary power. You can't keep this up indefinitely, he said, no longer hiding his concern. There has to be another way. Before T could respond, a new development demanded their attention. A transmission request had been received, originating from the Regent's flagship and directed specifically to the command center. He wishes to communicate, High Counselor Vela announced, her tone wary. Shall we accept? General Corax's instinct was clearly to refuse, but T nodded tiredly. Accept, she said. Want to hear what he says? After a moment of hesitation, the council agreed. A large holographic projection formed in the center of the command room, revealing the figure of Regent Merrick himself, a tall, imposing individual with sharp features and calculating eyes, dressed in formal attire that incorporated subtle technological enhancements. His expression betrayed no surprise at seeing T alive, only a cold assessment. "Princess Tavalia," he greeted with false warmth. "How fitting to find you at the ancestral seat. A sentimental choice, but ultimately predictable." T straightened as much as her exhaustion allowed, facing her family's usurper with remarkable composure. "Merrick," she acknowledged simply, deliberately omitting his claimed title. "You bring war to Sacred Place." The regent's expression hardened slightly at the perceived disrespect. "I bring restoration of order to a historical site being misused by terrorists and a misguided child." His gaze shifted to the heart shard. "That artifact belongs in the Imperial Archives, not around the neck of a minor who cannot possibly understand its significance." "Heart shard chose me," T replied steadily. "Recognizes true blood, rejects usurper." Merrick's cold smile never reached his eyes. "Ah, the charming myths we tell children. The heart shard is merely an advanced technological artifact created by your ancestors. Remarkable, certainly, but ultimately explicable by science. It responds to specific genetic markers, not some mystical royal worthiness." He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting to one almost of reason. "Princess, you are being used by these rebels for symbolic value. They care nothing for your well-being, only for the legitimacy you provide their cause. Surrender now, and I guarantee your safety. You will be treated with all the respect due your heritage, raised and educated as befits your station." "After you killed my family?" T asked, unexpected sharpness in her young voice. "After you destroyed all we built?" For the first time, Merrick appeared slightly unsettled, though he recovered quickly. "Political necessities sometimes require difficult choices. Your father was leading the empire toward decentralization and democratic reforms that would have weakened us irrevocably." His expression hardened. "The 12 systems require strong, centralized leadership guided by scientific rationality, not outdated traditions and popular sentiment." Throughout this exchange, Jace had been watching T carefully, noting her increasing strain despite her brave front. The shield was still fluctuating under her control, but each adjustment seemed to require greater effort. The heart shard's glow had developed an alarming flicker. "Enough talk," General Corax interrupted, stepping forward. "Your pretty words don't mask your treachery. Regent, the princess will never surrender to her family's murderer." Merrick's attention shifted to the general, his expression cooling further. "Always the blunt instrument, Corax." "Very well." He straightened, all pretense of cordiality vanishing. "Princess Tavalia, I offer one final opportunity. Deactivate the ancient shield and surrender the heart shard, or I will be forced to deploy measures that may damage the very historical legacy you seek to preserve." T stood firm, though Jace could see her legs trembling with fatigue. "Never," she declared simply. Merrick sighed with convincing regret. "Then you leave me no choice." He turned slightly, addressing someone off-screen. "Initiate protocol sundering. Target the shield harmonics." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in momentary silence before erupting into urgent activity. "What is protocol sundering?" Jace demanded of anyone who might answer. "What's he planning?" High Counselor Vela's expression had gone ashen. "If he has found a way to directly attack the connection between the heart shard and its bearer." T stumbled suddenly, catching herself against the control platform as the heart shard flickered violently. "Something pulling," she gasped, clutching the artifact protectively. "Trying to take connection." Outside, the shield began to show visible disruption, patches of instability appearing across its surface as some external force interfered with its fundamental operation. Sensors reported energy signatures, unlike anything in the Resistance database, emanating from devices being deployed from the Regent's flagship. "They're using technology from protocol sundering," Captain Alara realized with horror. Not just targeting the shield, targeting the princess's connection to the heart shard itself. T's face contorted with pain as she fought to maintain her link to the ancient artifact. The heart shard's glow had become erratic, pulses of brilliant light alternating with moments of near darkness. Each fluctuation seemed to cause her physical distress, as if something essential was being torn from her. Jace moved to support her as she swayed dangerously. "Stop," he urged. "Let go of the shield before it hurts you more." "Cannot.